Welcome to World of Sleepcraft. Tonight we're embarking on an extensive journey through the complete story of classic World of Warcraft, exploring every major event, character, and conflict that shaped Azeroth during this foundational era. From the aftermath of the Third War to the rise of new alliances, from ancient evils awakening beneath the world to heroes rising to meet them, we'll traverse the entire narrative landscape of classic WoW. This is the story of how a world shattered by war found new purpose, how old enemies became uneasy neighbors, and how the greatest threats ever faced by Azeroth emerged from the shadows. So settle in, relax, and prepare yourself for the complete chronicle of classic World of Warcraft's epic tale. The world of Azeroth stands at a crossroads as classic World of Warcraft begins. The Third War has concluded, but its scars remain visible across every continent. The Battle of Mount Hyjal saw the defeat of Archimonde and the Burning Legion, but at tremendous cost. The world tree Nordrassil was destroyed, and with it, the Night Elves lost their immortality. The alliance of Lordaeron lies in ruins, its capital city fallen to the Scourge. The Orcish Horde, once demon-corrupted invaders, has been reborn under new leadership and established itself in Kalimdor. Everything has changed, yet everything remains the same, in the sense that conflict continues to define this world. To understand where we are now, we must first understand where we've been. The First War saw the original Horde, corrupted by demonic blood and driven by conquest, invade Azeroth through the Dark Portal. They destroyed Stormwind, forcing its survivors to flee north to Lordaeron. The Second War followed, with the alliance of Lordaeron forming to counter the Horde threat. This coalition included humans from multiple kingdoms, high elves from Quel'Thalas, dwarves from Ironforge, and gnomes from Gnome Regan. Together they pushed the Horde back, sealed the Dark Portal, and imprisoned the surviving orcs in internment camps. But peace proved fleeting. The Burning Legion, having failed to conquer Azeroth through the Horde, deployed a new weapon, the Lich King. Created from the soul of the orc shaman Ner'zhul, the Lich King was sent to Azeroth to prepare the world for the Legion's return. Through the cult of the damned and the necromancer Kel'Thuzad, a plague was developed that didn't merely kill its victims, but reanimated them as undead servants. This plague spread across Lordaeron, creating the Scourge. Prince Arthas Menethil of Lordaeron investigated the plague alongside Jaina Proudmoore of the Kirin Tor. They discovered the truth too late. At Stratholme, Arthas made the terrible decision to purge the city before its inhabitants could be turned into undead. This act horrified Jaina, who could not accept what her beloved prince had become. She left him, and their paths diverged forever. Arthas traveled to Northrend, claimed the cursed blade, Frostmourne, and became the Lich King's greatest servant. He returned to Lordaeron, killed his own father, King Tyrannus, and led the Scourge in destroying the kingdom. The High Elves of Quel'Thalas fell next. Ranger General Sylvanas Windrunner fought valiantly to defend her people, but Arthas and the Scourge proved unstoppable. Sylvanas herself fell to Frostmourne, but death's peace was denied her. Arthas raised her as a banshee, forcing her to serve him. She was made to watch as Quel'Thalas burned, as the Sunwell was corrupted to resurrect Kel'Thuzad as a lich, and as Archimonde was summoned to Azeroth. The Burning Legion's invasion had begun in earnest. Archimonde targeted the world tree Nordrassil, seeking to destroy the Night Elves, who had repelled the Legion 10,000 years earlier. But Medivh, the last guardian, had returned to guide Azeroth's salvation. He appeared to both Thrall, leader of the new Horde, and Jaina Proudmoore, who had led Lordaeron's survivors to Kalimdor. Medivh told them that survival required cooperation between Alliance and Horde, a concept that seemed impossible given their history. Yet these were wise leaders. Thrall and Jaina chose to set aside past grievances and work together. They contacted the Night Elves led by Malfurion Stormrage and Tyrande Whisperwind. Together, the three factions united against Archimonde. The Night Elves made the ultimate sacrifice, detonating Nordrassil to destroy the Demon Lord. This act saved the world, but cost the Night Elves their immortality. Malfurion called upon the ancient spirits of the forest, while the combined armies delayed Archimonde, and through unprecedented cooperation, they achieved the impossible. Archimonde's defeat. The Third War was over, but the world it left behind was fundamentally changed. The alliance of Lordaeron was gone, its capital city a haunted ruin. The High Elves were scattered, their homeland destroyed. The Night Elves had lost their immortality and their world tree. The Horde had established itself in Kalimdor, far from the eastern kingdoms where it had once waged war. New alliances were forming, old ones were breaking apart, and the stage was set for the conflicts and adventures that would define classic World of Warcraft. This is the world we enter when classic WoW begins. Two continents, Kalimdor and the Eastern Kingdoms, separated by the Great Sea. Multiple races, each with their own history, culture, and motivations. Two major factions, the Alliance and the Horde, locked in an uneasy peace that could shatter at any moment. Ancient evils stirring beneath the surface, elemental lords imprisoned but not forgotten, old gods dreaming in their prisons, dragons scheming in their lairs. This is Azeroth, and this is where our story truly begins. The geography of Azeroth itself tells a story. Kalimdor, the western continent, is vast and largely unexplored by the Eastern Kingdom's races. It's home to the Night Elves, the Tauren, and now the Orcs who have established Durotar. The Barrens stretch across central Kalimdor, a harsh landscape where survival is a daily struggle. Ashenvale Forest, sacred to the Night Elves, has become a battleground as the Warsong clan harvests its lumber. The deserts of Tanaris hide ancient secrets, while the jungles of Stranglethorn Vale teem with danger and opportunity. The Eastern Kingdoms, by contrast, are more developed, more settled, more scarred by war. Lordaeron lies in ruins, its lands corrupted by the Scourge. The Plaguelands, both eastern and western, are wastelands where the undead roam freely. Stormwind stands as a beacon of human resilience, rebuilt from the ashes of the First War. Ironforge, the dwarven capital, is carved into the mountain itself, a testament to dwarven engineering and determination. The human kingdoms of the north, what remains of them, struggle to survive in a world that has changed beyond recognition. Between these continents lies the Great Sea, vast and dangerous, filled with pirates, sea monsters, and ancient mysteries. The Maelstrom, a massive whirlpool at the center of the sea, marks where the Well of Eternity once stood, where the world was shattered during the War of the Ancients. This is not just empty water, it's a barrier and a connection, a reminder of the world's violent past and uncertain future. The new Horde represents one of the most dramatic transformations in Warcraft history. The original Horde was a demon-corrupted force of conquest, created when the orc shaman Ner'zhul made a pact with the Burning Legion. That Horde invaded Azeroth through the Dark Portal, destroyed Stormwind, and waged war across the Eastern Kingdoms. But it was defeated, its survivors imprisoned in internment camps, where they suffered abuse and humiliation, while demonic corruption still flowed in their veins. The internment camps were not places of rehabilitation or even simple imprisonment. They were places of degradation, where orcs were treated as less than animals. Guards subjected prisoners to daily abuse, seeing them as monsters rather than people. The orcs themselves were trapped in a state of lethargy, their will broken, their spirits crushed. The demonic corruption that had driven them to war still lingered in their blood, but without the demonic influence to channel it, they simply existed in a state of apathy, waiting to die. Some orcs managed to escape, retreating through the dark portal or hiding in the wilderness. Others established themselves in Blackrock Mountain's depths, refusing to surrender. But most remained in the camps, their numbers dwindling as despair and disease took their toll. The Horde, once a force that threatened to destroy all of Azeroth, had been reduced to broken prisoners, their future seemingly non-existent. This was the world Thrall was born into. His parents, Durotan and Draka, were members of the Frostwolf clan, one of the few orc clans that had refused to drink the demon, blood that corrupted the Horde. They had tried to warn others, but their warnings went unheeded. When the Horde was defeated, Durotan and Draka were murdered. Based on what we know about the tensions within the Horde at that time, it appears their killers may have been other orcs who saw their refusal to drink the blood as betrayal, though the exact circumstances remain unclear. Their infant son was left to die in the wilderness, a victim of the very corruption his parents had tried to prevent. Thrall's story begins in one of these camps. Born to Durotan and Draka of the Frostwolf clan, Thrall was orphaned as an infant when his parents were murdered. He should have died in the wilderness, but destiny intervened. Aedelus Blackmore, an overseer of the internment camps, found the infant orc. This was no act of charity. Blackmore's plan was to raise Thrall as an enslaved gladiator, educate him in literacy, strategy, and warfare, then use him to command other orcs in a renewed campaign of aggression. This campaign would feature Blackmore directing the assault against his own species. Thrall grew up experiencing humanity's cruelty, yet he also discovered that humans were capable of kindness and mercy. Taretha Foxton, a human girl who became his childhood companion, showed him compassion and eventually facilitated his escape. She sacrificed her own life to help him, a sacrifice that would shape Thrall's understanding of what was possible between orcs and humans. After escaping captivity, Thrall encountered surviving orc communities still living on Azeroth. Among these were Grommash Hellscream leading the Warsong clan, Drekthar with Frostwolf clan survivors, and even Orgrim Doomhammer, the former war chief who had evaded Alliance capture after the Horde's defeat. The young Thrall's presence impressed and motivated Doomhammer, who saw in him the future of their people. United, they initiated an uprising to free their people from the internment camps. During the fighting, Doomhammer perished, but before his death, he chose to transfer his armor, his title as Warchief, and his legendary hammer to Thrall. This moment birthed an entirely new horde, one that would be fundamentally different from its predecessor. Thrall's horde would be built on honor, not demonic corruption. It would seek a homeland, not conquest. It would defend the oppressed, not become oppressors. But first, Thrall needed to find that homeland. Medivh appeared to him, telling him that the orc's future lay across the sea in Kalimdor. Thrall gathered his people and set sail, but the journey would prove more eventful than expected. A violent tempest struck Thrall's commandeered vessels, forcing them ashore on a chain of islands. There, they discovered Sen'jin, chieftain of the Darkspear Trolls, who had foreseen their arrival. His tribe was currently battling hostile humans who were establishing settlements on the islands. But it wasn't humans who would claim Sen'jin's life. Murlocs worshipping a sea witch, later revealed to be Naga, performed that deed. Sen'jin became a sacrifice to honor her. His son Vol'jin assumed leadership, and the Darkspear joined forces with Thrall. They evacuated the submerging islands and integrated into the Horde. During these events, Vol'jin was pursuing the path toward becoming a shadow hunter alongside his closest friend, Zalazani. Vol'jin's absence during his father's death, combined with most trolls following Thrall onward, left Vol'jin and some tribesmen to defy the Sea Witch's fury alone. Their purpose involved gathering available supplies before rejoining their kin approximately 1 year later in Durotar, the new orc territory. However, the bond between Vol'jin and Zalazane wasn't destined to endure. Power corrupted Zalazane, leading him to betray their people. Employing sinister voodoo, he stripped most Darkspear trolls of their free will, compelling their obedience. Fearing his entire people would succumb to Zalazane's magic, Vol'jin commanded complete abandonment of the Echo Isles, relocating everyone to Sen'jin Village, a coastal fishing settlement in Durotar. Champions would eventually assault Zalazane and his followers to reclaim the Troll's primary Kalimdor homeland. After finally reaching Kalimdor, Thrall required considerable time locating his scattered forces as the storm had separated them. During this search, he encountered Cairn Bloodhoof, leader of the Bloodhoof Tauren, amid their ongoing conflict with their ancient adversaries, the Centaur. These beings originated from Princess Theridris's union with Zeatar, Cenarius' son. Thrall couldn't ignore the injustice unfolding before him. His horde represented hope's beacon for peoples who were misunderstood, oppressed, and overlooked. His horde would defend such vulnerable populations. Together, Thrall's orcs and Cairn's Tauren devastated the Centaur forces. This defeat stunned the creatures, driving them from the barrens in humiliation. Never again would they perceive the Tauren as vulnerable targets, while the Tauren glimpsed a promising future. Finally, they had broken the conflict's endless cycle. The Tauren's wandering existence concluded. While Cairn assisted Thrall in locating Medivh, portions of his people traveled west into Mulgor's grassy expanse. There, they would establish permanent residence, constructing Thunder Bluff, a city built upon mesas connected by rope bridges. This would become the Tauren capital, a place of peace and spiritual connection to the Earth Mother. Thrall and Cairn's shared experiences forged a nearly indestructible alliance, prompting the Tauren to join the Horde. The Tauren brought with them their deep connection to nature, their shamanistic traditions, and their wisdom. They would become the Horde's spiritual guides, helping to ensure that this new Horde remained true to its honorable path. One final race remains to be explained regarding Horde membership: the Forsaken. Understanding their inclusion requires understanding the Burning Legion's planned invasion and the scourge that resulted from it. As mentioned previously, Lordaeron's alliance had repelled the first Horde incursion. This coalition comprised major human kingdoms: Quel'Thas's high elves, dwarves, and gnomes, united for Azeroth's preservation. The Horde attempted a second invasion, prompting legendary heroes to traverse the Dark Portal and confront them directly. These champions were compelled to seal the portal from the opposite side and wouldn't resurface until the subsequent expansion, meaning the Alliance lost substantial military strength. Additionally, peacetime had initiated internal fracturing within the Alliance. Furthermore, the Legion deployed one of its most formidable creations, the Lich King, to initiate their invasion. With Kel'Thuzad and the Cult of the Damned's assistance, they developed and implemented plans for a plague spreading across Lordaeron that didn't merely kill the population, but reanimated them as undead. Within Shalomance, the Necromancy Academy, they amplified their power and influence, preparing to purge the world. These activities naturally attracted notice. The king dispatched his son Arthas for investigation, accompanied by Jaina Proudmoore from the Kirin Tor. They eventually uncovered the truth. At Stratholme, Arthas made an impossible choice. He would purge the city, preventing the undead's further spread. This decision would permanently impact the city and everyone who witnessed it. Jaina found this decision incomprehensible. This path exceeded what she could accept from her beloved prince. She departed, placing them on divergent life trajectories. Arthas eventually traveled to Northrend, claimed Frostmourne, and became the Lich King's servant, while Medivh guided Jaina, leading Lordaeron's survivors to Kalimdor, where she would eventually stand with Thrall against the Legion. She accomplished precisely that, while Arthas and the Scourge carved a destructive path toward Quel'Thalas. The elves struggled valiantly, protecting their realm. Countless brave warriors perished only to be resurrected, serving the undead army. Ranger General Sylvanas Windrunner exhausted every option, holding the defensive line and delaying this inexorable advance. Yet ultimately, she too succumbed to Arthas and Frostmourne. Death's peaceful embrace was denied her. Her determined resistance so impressed Arthas that he resurrected her as a banshee, now compelled to follow his commands. She was forced to witness as the High Elves' homeland fell, and their sunwell was utilized to resurrect Kel'Thuzad as a lich. He subsequently summoned Archimonde, who targeted the World Tree Nordrassil and his ancient enemies, the Night Elves. However, Arthas eventually lost a substantial portion of power granted by the Lich King. This loss sufficed for Sylvanas and fellow undead creations to reclaim autonomy and rebel against their former master. These Forsaken rallied behind Sylvanas. She pursued vengeance, but Kel'Thuzad's unwavering loyalty to Arthas saved the prince's life, enabling his return to Northrend and eventual merger with the Lich King. His kingdom remained under his faithful lich's control, though Sylvanas harbored different intentions. She craved revenge against Arthas, beginning with dominating the territories the prince had devastated. This proved challenging. The Dreadlords, Legion demons, were assigned to oversee undead operations. They still occupied the region and wouldn't relinquish control easily. Varimathras fell first. Pleading for survival, Sylvanas granted him an opportunity to prove his value fighting alongside her. With his support, she targeted Deatharok, who had mind-controlled local humans under Garithos' command. Their minds were freed, Deatharok perished, and Garithos' troops joined her forces. She promised territorial restoration in exchange for his assistance, a promise she never intended honoring. Varimathras personally slew Balnazar, the final Dreadlord, as a loyalty test, and following mission completion, Garithos became ghoul food. His loss would go unmourned. Claiming territories differs from maintaining them. The Scarlet Crusade, operating from their monastery, is an organization fanatically dedicated to undead eradication. Dreadlord infiltration made them so zealous they could no longer distinguish between living and undead. Kel'Thuzad also requires consideration. Humans and other forces viewing them as Scourge desperately needed allies, and the Horde provided acceptance. Back with Thrall, he eventually located Medivh, who informed both the Warchief and Jaina that global survival required cooperation. A peculiar concept at that time, alliance and Horde collaboration, given their history. Yet they proved wise leaders and chose to abandon past grievances. This prompted remarkable events, like Grommash Hellscream's self-sacrifice, slaying Manaroth, liberating his people from demonic corruption. Their group also contacted Malfurion Stormrage and Tyrande Whisperwind, the Night Elf leaders fully aware of Archimonde's planetary return. They united around a plan, detonating World Tree Nordrassil with Archimonde. This meant the Night Elves would forfeit immortality, but that represented a modest cost for world salvation. Malfurion assembled the forest's ancient spirits while their armies delayed Archimonde as long as possible, and through cooperation they accomplished the unthinkable, Archimonde's defeat. Medivh's strategies succeeded exactly as hoped. His worldly purpose concluded, though Jaina and Thrall committed to preserving this peace. She led remaining Lordaeron survivors to settle in Theramore, while Thrall established himself in Kalimdor within Tunduratar, named honoring his father. Their capital, Orgrimmar, named for Orgrim Doomhammer, would serve as the Horde's regional power center. This positioned Thrall and Jaina to demonstrate the remarkable achievements possible through Alliance-Horde cooperation. The construction of Orgrimmar itself tells a story. The city is built into the canyons of Durotar, its architecture reflecting Orcish values, strength, honor, and connection to the land. The Valley of Strength serves as the city's heart, where warriors train and leaders gather. The Valley of Wisdom houses the shaman, the spiritual guides of the Horde. The Valley of Spirits is home to the trolls, while the Drag serves as the city's commercial district. Each section of the city reflects the Horde's diversity, its commitment to honor, and its determination to build something lasting. The city's defenses are formidable, with massive gates and watchtowers protecting it from attack. But Orgrimmar is not just a fortress, it's a home, a place where the Horde's races can live together, work together, and build a future together. The city's very existence is a statement. The Horde is here to stay, and it will not be driven away again. Jaina Proudmoore, meanwhile, established Theramore Isle off the coast of Dustwallow Marsh. This human settlement serves as a bridge between the Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor, a place where Alliance forces can operate in the New World. Theramore is smaller than Orgrimmar, but it's no less important. It represents the Alliance's commitment to maintaining a presence in Kalimdor, to watching the Horde, and to being ready for whatever comes next. The relationship between Theramore and Orgrimmar is complex. Thrall and Jaina maintain their personal friendship, but their peoples remain suspicious of each other. Theramore's guards watch the Horde's movements, while Orgrimmar's scouts monitor Theramore's activities. It's an uneasy peace, maintained by the respect between two leaders who understand that cooperation is sometimes necessary, even when it's difficult. Not everyone can abandon the past so easily, though. Internal and external forces maintain war's drumbeat, war drums thunder once more. The Forsaken, having claimed Lordaeron's ruins, found themselves isolated. Humans viewed them as monsters, no different from the Scourge. The Alliance would never accept them. But the Horde, itself composed of misunderstood and outcast peoples, could offer them a place. Sylvanas saw the strategic value in this alliance. The Horde could provide protection and resources. In return, the Forsaken would offer their military strength and their knowledge of the Eastern Kingdoms. Thus, the Forsaken joined the Horde, though this alliance would always remain somewhat uneasy. The Forsaken's methods, their use of plague and undeath, their ruthless pragmatism, would sometimes conflict with Thrall's vision of an honorable Horde. But for now, the alliance held, and the Horde became a force spanning 2 continents. The Tauren people represent one of the noblest races in Azeroth, a people deeply connected to the Earth Mother and committed to living in harmony with nature. Their story in classic World of Warcraft begins with their ancient conflict against the Centaur, a struggle that had defined their existence for generations. The Centaur are brutal, savage creatures, born from the union of Princess Theradris, an elemental being of earth and stone, and Zeatar, son of the demigod Cenarius. This union created a race of beings who inherited Theradris's destructive nature and Zeatar's connection to nature, but twisted into something monstrous. The Centaur became nomadic raiders, constantly attacking the Tauren tribes as they wandered the barrens. The Tauren, peaceful by nature, but fierce when roused, fought back, but the conflict seemed endless. The Centaur's numbers and ferocity made it impossible for the Tauren to establish permanent settlements. They were forced to remain nomadic, always moving, always defending themselves. Cairn Bloodhoof, chieftain of the Bloodhoof tribe, led his people with wisdom and strength. He was an elder among the Tauren, having lived through decades of conflict. He had seen his people suffer, had watched as the Centaur raids claimed countless lives. But he never lost hope that one day the Tauren would find peace. That hope seemed distant when Thrall and his orcs arrived in Kalimdor. The Tauren were engaged in yet another battle with the Centaur when Thrall encountered them. The orc warchief could have continued on his journey, could have ignored this conflict that didn't involve his people. But that wasn't Thrall's way. His horde was meant to be a beacon of hope for the oppressed, a force that would defend those who couldn't defend themselves. Thrall saw the Tauren's struggle and recognized it as the kind of injustice his horde was meant to fight. He ordered his orcs to join the battle, and together, orc and Tauren warriors devastated the Centaur forces. This wasn't just a military victory, it was a breaking of the cycle that had trapped the Tauren for so long. The Centaur were driven from the barrens in humiliation, their confidence shattered. Never again would they see the Tauren as easy targets. For the Tauren, this victory represented something they had almost forgotten was possible: hope. Finally, they had broken free from the endless cycle of conflict. They could envision a future that didn't involve constant warfare. While Cairn assisted Thrall in locating Medivh, portions of his people traveled west into Mulgore, a vast grassland region that had long been their spiritual home. In Mulgore, the Tauren would build something they had never been able to build before: a permanent home. Thunder Bluff rose from the plains, a city constructed on 3 great mesas connected by rope bridges and elevators. This wasn't just a settlement, it was a statement. The Tauren were no longer nomads. They had a home, a capital, a place where their culture could flourish. Thunder Bluff became a center of Tauren spirituality, a place where they could commune with the Earth Mother and practice their shamanistic traditions. The city's design reflected the Tauren's connection to nature, with buildings that blended seamlessly into the landscape. The Great Lift connected the city to the surrounding plains, while totems and spiritual sites dotted the mesas. The Tauren's alliance with the Horde was built on mutual respect and shared values. Both peoples understood what it meant to be misunderstood, to be seen as savages when they were actually honorable. Both valued strength, but strength tempered by wisdom. The Tauren brought to the Horde their deep spiritual connection to the land, their shamanistic traditions, and their commitment to protecting nature. Cairn Bloodhoof became one of Thrall's most trusted advisors, a voice of wisdom and experience. The Tauren would prove invaluable allies, not just in battle, but in helping the Horde maintain its honor and its connection to the old ways. They would serve as spiritual guides, reminding the Horde of what it meant to be true to one's nature while still being honorable. But the Tauren's story in Classic WoW isn't just about their alliance with the Horde. It's also about their ongoing struggle to maintain their way of life in a world that's constantly changing. The Centaur, while defeated, weren't completely gone. They still raided from time to time, still posed a threat. The Tauren had to remain vigilant, had to continue defending their new home. The Tauren also had to navigate their relationship with other races. The Night Elves, for example, shared the Tauren's connection to nature, but the Night Elves' relationship with the Horde was complicated. The Horde had killed Cenarius, the demigod, who was so important to both Tauren and Night Elf culture. This created tension, though the Tauren understood that Grom Hellscream's actions had been driven by demonic corruption, not malice. The Tauren's presence in the Horde also helped balance the more pragmatic elements, like the Forsaken. While Sylvaness and her people were focused on survival and revenge, the Tauren reminded everyone that there were higher values worth fighting for. They were the Horde's conscience in many ways, ensuring that honor and respect for life remained central to the faction's identity. Mulgore itself is a region of great beauty and spiritual significance. The rolling plains stretch as far as the eye can see, dotted with Kodo herds and bisected by the great road that connects Thunder Bluff to the outside world. The region is home to the Red Cloud Mesa, where the Tauren first encountered the Centaur, and to the Stone Bull Lake, a place of great spiritual significance. The Tauren's connection to the land is evident in every aspect of Mulgore's design, from the totems that mark sacred sites to the spiritual significance they attribute to various locations throughout the region. The Bloodhoof tribe, led by Cairn, is not the only Tauren tribe, though it is the most prominent. Other tribes exist throughout Kalimdor, each with their own traditions and customs. But the Bloodhoof tribe's alliance with the Horde has made it the most influential, and Thunder Bluff has become a gathering place for all Tauren, regardless of their tribal affiliation. The Tauren's relationship with the Kodo, the great beasts of the plains, is also significant. These massive creatures are not just mounts or beasts of burden. They are partners, companions, and symbols of the Tauren's connection to the natural world. The Kodo are respected, cared for, and treated as equals rather than property. This relationship reflects the Tauren's broader philosophy, that all living things have value, that nature is not something to be conquered, but something to be respected and protected. In the end, the Tauren's story in classic World of Warcraft is one of transformation. They went from a nomadic people constantly under threat to a settled civilization with a permanent home. They went from isolation to being part of a larger alliance. They went from endless conflict to the possibility of peace. But they never lost sight of who they were, never abandoned their connection to the Earth Mother or their commitment to living in harmony with nature. They brought these values to the Horde, enriching it and helping to ensure that Thrall's vision of an honorable Horde would endure. The Forsaken represent one of the most complex and morally ambiguous groups in classic World of Warcraft. They are undead, former humans and high elves who were killed by the Scourge and then broke free from the Lich King's control. They are neither living nor truly dead, existing in a state between life and death. They are led by Sylvanas Windrunner, the former Ranger General of Quel'Thalas, who was transformed into a banshee by Arthas Menethil. To understand the Forsaken, we must first understand how they came to be. The Scourge was the Burning Legion's weapon, created to weaken Azeroth before the Legion's invasion. The Lich King, formed from the soul of the orc shaman Ner'zhul, was sent to Azeroth to spread death and undeath. Through the cult of the damned and the necromancer Kel'Thuzad, a plague was developed that killed its victims and then reanimated them as undead servants. This plague spread across Lordaeron, turning entire cities into Scourge strongholds. Prince Arthas Menethil, investigating the plague, eventually fell to darkness himself. He claimed the cursed blade Frostmourne in Northrend, becoming the Lich King's greatest servant. He returned to Lordaeron, killed his own father, King Tyrannus, and led the Scourge in destroying the kingdom. Quel'Thalas fell next. The High Elves had maintained their isolation for thousands of years, but the Scourge proved unstoppable. Ranger General Sylvanas Windrunner fought valiantly to defend her people, but Arthas and his forces overwhelmed the elven defenses. Sylvanas herself fell to Frostmourne, but death's peace was denied her. Arthas, impressed by her resistance, raised her as a banshee, forcing her to serve him. Sylvanas was made to watch as Quel'Thalas burned, as the Sunwell was corrupted to resurrect Kel'Thuzad as a lich, and as Archimonde was summoned to Azeroth. She was forced to participate in the destruction of her own people, an experience that would shape her forever. But then something unexpected happened. Arthas lost a substantial portion of the power the Lich King had granted him, and with that loss, Sylvanas and other undead creations regained their free will. Sylvanas immediately rebelled against her former master. She rallied other free-willed undead around her, and together they became the Forsaken. Their name reflects their status. They are forsaken by the living, who see them as monsters, and forsaken by death itself, which denied them peace. They exist in a liminal state, neither alive nor dead, rejected by both. Sylvanas's primary motivation was revenge against Arthas. She wanted to make him suffer as she had suffered, to take from him everything he valued. But first, she needed to secure her position. The Dreadlords, Legion demons, assigned to oversee the Scourge in Lordaeron, still occupied the region. They wouldn't relinquish control easily. Varimathras was the first to fall. When Sylvanas's forces cornered him, he pleaded for his life, offering to serve her instead. Sylvanas, ever pragmatic, saw the value in having a Dreadlord's knowledge and power. She granted him the opportunity to prove his worth. With Varimathras' support, Sylvanas targeted Deatharok, another Dreadlord who had mind-controlled local humans under the command of Grand Marshal Garithos. Sylvanas's forces freed the humans from Deatharok's control, and Deatharok was destroyed. Garithos and his troops, grateful for their freedom, joined Sylvanas' forces. She promised them that she would help restore Lordaeron to human control, a promise she had no intention of keeping. Varimathras personally slew Balnazar, the final Dreadlord, as a test of loyalty. Once the Dreadlords were dealt with, Garithos had served his purpose. He became food for the ghouls, and his loss went unmourned. With the Dreadlords eliminated, Sylvanas claimed Lordaeron's ruins as her own. The capital city, now called the Undercity, became the Forsaken's home, but claiming territory and maintaining it are two different things. The Scarlet Crusade, operating from their monastery in the eastern Plaguelands, was fanatically dedicated to eradicating all undead. Dreadlord infiltration had made them so zealous that they could no longer distinguish between the Scourge and the Forsaken. To them, all undead were abominations that must be destroyed. Kel'Thuzad and the Scourge also remained a threat. The Lich still controlled the significant portions of the Plaguelands, and he viewed the Forsaken as traitors. The living races, particularly humans, saw the Forsaken as no different from the Scourge. They were monsters, abominations, things that should not exist. The Alliance would never accept them. This isolation forced the Forsaken to seek allies elsewhere. The Horde, itself composed of misunderstood and outcast peoples, could offer them protection and resources. Sylvanas saw the strategic value in this alliance. The Horde could provide military support, trade, and a buffer against the Alliance. In return, the Forsaken would offer their military strength, their knowledge of the Eastern Kingdoms, and their willingness to use methods the Horde's other members might find distasteful. Thus, the Forsaken chose the Horde, though this alliance would always remain somewhat uneasy. The Forsaken's methods, their use of plague and biological weapons, their ruthless pragmatism, would sometimes conflict with Thrall's vision of an honorable Horde. But for now, the alliance held, and the Horde gained a foothold in the Eastern Kingdoms. The Forsaken's story in classic WoW is one of survival against impossible odds. They are hated by the living, hunted by the Scarlet Crusade, threatened by the Scourge, and viewed with suspicion even by their Horde allies. But they endure. They have claimed their territory, built their society, and established their place in the world. They may be forsaken, but they refuse to be forgotten. Sylvanas Windrunner remains their leader, driven by her desire for revenge against Arthas. But she is also a pragmatist, willing to make whatever alliances and compromises are necessary to ensure her people's survival. The Forsaken may be undead, but they are not mindless. They have free will, they have goals, they have a future. And in classic World of Warcraft, that future is just beginning. The Undercity itself is a marvel of engineering and a testament to the Forsaken's determination. Built beneath the ruins of Lordaeron's capital, the city is a maze of tunnels, chambers, and halls. The royal quarter houses Sylvanas and her advisors, while the trade quarter serves as the city's commercial center. The war quarter is home to the Forsaken's military forces, and the magic quarter houses their mages and alchemists. The apothecarium, hidden deep beneath the city, is where the Forsaken conduct their most secretive research, developing new plagues and biological weapons. The city's design reflects the Forsaken's nature. It's dark, it's practical, and it's built for survival. There are no windows, no open spaces, no reminders of the living world above. The Forsaken have created their own world, separate from the one that rejected them. But the city is also a reminder of what was lost, of the kingdom that once stood above, of the lives that were destroyed to create the Forsaken. The Forsaken's relationship with the living is complex. They see themselves as the rightful inheritors of Lordaeron, as the kingdom's true survivors. But the living see them as abominations, as monsters that should not exist. This conflict defines much of the Forsaken's story in classic WoW. They are fighting not just for survival, but for acceptance, for recognition that they are more than just mindless undead. The Scarlet Crusade represents the most extreme form of this rejection. This organization, originally formed to fight the Scourge, has become so fanatical that it can no longer distinguish between the Scourge and the Forsaken. To the Scarlet Crusade, all undead are abominations that must be destroyed, regardless of whether they serve the Lich King or maintain their free will. The Forsaken's conflict with the Scarlet Crusade is ongoing, a war that will continue for as long as both organizations exist. But the Forsaken are not without allies. Their membership in the Horde provides them with military support, trade, and a measure of protection. The Horde's other races may be uncomfortable with the Forsaken's methods, but they recognize the strategic value of having a foothold in the Eastern Kingdoms. The Forsaken, in turn, provide the Horde with knowledge of the Eastern Kingdoms, with military bases, and with a willingness to use methods that other Horde races might find distasteful. This alliance is not without tension. The Tauren, in particular, are uncomfortable with the Forsaken's use of plague and biological weapons. They see these methods as dishonorable, as violations of the natural order. But Thrall, ever the pragmatist, recognizes that the Horde needs the Forsaken, and the Forsaken need the Horde. For now, the alliance holds, though it remains uneasy, a constant reminder that the Horde is not a monolithic entity, but a coalition of very different peoples with very different values. The alliance in classic World of Warcraft is a very different entity from the alliance of Lordaeron that fought in the Second and Third Wars. That original alliance was centered in Lordaeron, with King Tyrannus Menethil as its leader. But Lordaeron fell to the Scourge, its king murdered by his own son, its people either dead or transformed into undead. The capital city became the Undercity, home to the Forsaken. The alliance of Lordaeron was gone. In its place, a new alliance formed, centered around Stormwind, the human kingdom in the south of the Eastern Kingdoms. Stormwind had its own tragic history. During the First War, the original Horde invaded through the Dark Portal and destroyed Stormwind. King Lane Wrynn was assassinated, and the kingdom's survivors, led by Anduin Lothar, fled north to Lordaeron. There, they helped form the Alliance of Lordaeron, which eventually defeated the Horde and rebuilt Stormwind. But Stormwind's troubles were far from over. The kingdom's reconstruction was a massive undertaking, requiring the labor of the stonemasons guild. These skilled craftsmen rebuilt Stormwind from the ground up, creating the magnificent city that stands in classic WoW. But when the work was complete, the House of Nobles, influenced by Lady Katrana Prester, refused to pay the stonemasons what they had been promised. This betrayal had catastrophic consequences. Street riots broke out, and during the chaos, Queen Tiffin Wrynn was killed. The stonemasons, now calling themselves the Defias Brotherhood, retreated to the Deadmines, where they plotted revenge against the kingdom that had betrayed them. Their leader, Edwin Van Cleef, became one of Stormwind's greatest enemies. But there was more to this story than simple betrayal. Lady Katrana Prester was not who she appeared to be. She was actually Onyxia, daughter of Deathwing, in human form. The Black Dragon had infiltrated Stormwind's nobility, using her influence to weaken the kingdom from within. She convinced the House of Nobles to withhold payment from the stonemasons, knowing it would create chaos. She also orchestrated the kidnapping of King Varian Wrynn, planning to split him into two beings, one weak-willed version she could control and one strong-willed version that would be eliminated. These plans failed spectacularly. The strong-willed Varian managed to escape, though all of this occurred off-screen, without in-game depiction during Classic WoW. Instead, players discover Katrana's true identity, expose her publicly, and send her fleeing to her lair. There, champions assemble to slay the dragon and return her head to Stormwind as proof of her defeat. During Classic WoW, Stormwind is ruled by young Anduin Wrynn, Varian's son. With his father missing and presumed dead, Anduin became king, though he was too young to rule effectively. Bolvar Fordragon, a legendary paladin, was appointed regent lord to manage the kingdom's daily administrative duties until the child matured. This is the same Bolvar who would later become the Lich King, though that's a story for another time. Stormwind's story in Classic WoW is one of resilience and rebuilding. The kingdom has survived the First War, has been rebuilt, and now faces new challenges. The Defias Brotherhood continues to threaten the kingdom from the Deadmines. Onyxia's influence has been removed, but the damage she caused remains. King Varian is missing, and the kingdom is being run by a regent while a child sits on the throne. But Stormwind endures. It remains the heart of the Alliance, a beacon of hope for humans and their allies. The city itself is a marvel, with its canals, its districts, and its grand architecture. It's a symbol of what the Alliance can achieve when it works together, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The Alliance in Classic WoW includes more than just humans, of course. The Night Elves have joined, bringing with them their ancient wisdom and their connection to nature. The Dwarves of Ironforge remain staunch allies, their mountain kingdom providing military strength and resources. The Gnomes, having lost their own capital, have found refuge in Ironforge, though they dream of reclaiming Gnomeregan. Together, these races form the Alliance, a coalition dedicated to order, justice, and the protection of Azeroth. They stand in opposition to the Horde, though the relationship between the two factions is complex. They fought together against the Burning Legion, but that cooperation was born of necessity. In the aftermath of the Third War, old tensions have resurfaced. The Alliance and Horde are once again enemies, locked in a cold war that could turn hot at any moment. Stormwind itself is a city of contrasts. The canals that run through it are both beautiful and practical, providing transportation and defense. The districts are clearly defined. The trade district bustles with commerce. The cathedral square serves as the city's spiritual center. The old town houses the city's military, and the mage quarter is home to the city's magical practitioners. The park, once a place of beauty, has been corrupted by the Defias Brotherhood, its trees cut down, its fountains destroyed, a constant reminder of the kingdom's ongoing struggles. The city's architecture reflects human values, order, tradition, and permanence. The buildings are grand, the streets are wide, and everything is designed to last. But beneath this surface of stability, there are cracks. The Defias Brotherhood continues to threaten the kingdom. The House of Nobles, once a symbol of stability, has been compromised by Onyxia's influence. King Varian is missing, and the kingdom is being run by a regent while a child sits on the throne. The Defias Brotherhood's story is particularly tragic. These were skilled craftsmen, the Stonemasons Guild, who rebuilt Stormwind from the ground up. They were promised payment for their work, but when the work was complete, the House of Nobles, influenced by Onyxia, refused to pay them. This betrayal led to riots, during which Queen Tiffin Rin was killed. The Stonemasons, now calling themselves the Defias Brotherhood, retreated to the Deadmines, where they plot their revenge. Edwin Van Cleef, the leader of the Defias Brotherhood, is not a simple villain. He's a man who was betrayed, who lost everything, and who is fighting for what he believes is justice. His methods may be extreme, but his cause is understandable. The Defias Brotherhood represents the dark side of Stormwind's story, the consequences of corruption and betrayal, the price of broken promises. The Deadmines themselves tell a story. Once a gold mine that helped fund Stormwind's reconstruction, the mine was abandoned when the gold ran out. The Defias Brotherhood moved in, turning it into a base of operations and a symbol of their determination. The mine is filled with traps, guards, and Van Cleef's personal forces. It's a fortress, a statement that the Defias Brotherhood will not be easily defeated, that they will fight until they get what they believe they deserve. But the Defias Brotherhood is not the only threat to Stormwind. The kingdom's borders are constantly under pressure. The Hyjal operates in the eastern kingdoms through the Forsaken, and tensions remain high. The Scourge continues to threaten from the north, and the Plaguelands are a constant reminder of what happens when the undead are not stopped. Stormwind may be the heart of the Alliance, but it's a heart that beats in a world filled with danger. The Night Elves represent one of the oldest and most powerful races in Azeroth, with a history stretching back over 10,000 years. Their story in classic World of Warcraft is one of profound loss and adaptation as they struggle to come to terms with the destruction of their world tree, Nordrissel, and the loss of their immortality. To understand the Night Elves' situation in classic WoW, we must first understand what they lost. Nordrassil was the world tree, planted on Mount Hyjal after the War of the Ancients over 10,000 years ago. It was blessed by the three dragon aspects, Alexstrasza, Ysera, and Nosdormu. These blessings granted the Night Elves immortality, making them ageless and nearly invulnerable to disease. The Night Elves had lived with this immortality for millennia. They had watched other races rise and fall, had seen empires crumble, had witnessed the passage of ages. Their long lives gave them perspective, wisdom, and a deep connection to the world around them. But it also made them somewhat isolated, somewhat removed from the concerns of mortal races. All of that changed during the Third War. When Archimonde and the Burning Legion invaded Azeroth, targeting Nordrassil, the Night Elves faced an impossible choice. The only way to defeat Archimonde was to detonate the World Tree, using its power to destroy the Demon Lord. This would save the world, but it would cost the Night Elves their immortality. Malfurion Stormrage, the Archdruid, made the decision. He called upon the ancient spirits of the forest, while the combined armies of Alliance, Horde, and Night Elves delayed Archimonde. The plan worked. Nordrassil was destroyed, Archimonde was defeated, and the world was saved. But the Night Elves were now mortal. This transformation was profound. Night Elves who had lived for thousands of years suddenly found themselves aging, vulnerable to disease, facing the prospect of death. Their entire society had to adapt to this new reality. They could no longer take the long view, could no longer wait centuries for problems to resolve themselves. They had to act, and they had to act quickly. Fandral Staghelm, a prominent druid, believed he had a solution. Without consulting Malfurion, who was in the Emerald Dream, Staghelm planted a new world tree, Teldrassil. This tree, located off the coast of Kalimdor, was meant to restore the Night Elves' immortality, but Teldrassil lacked the blessings of the dragon aspects. Alexstrasza, Ysera, and Nosdormu refused to bless it, seeing it as an act of selfishness rather than necessity. Malfurion, when he learned of Teldrassil, was furious. He believed that nature would never bless such selfishness, and he was correct. Teldrassil would never grant immortality. Instead, it would become a symbol of the Night Elves' struggle to adapt to their new mortality. The tree itself would eventually face corruption from the Emerald Nightmare, though that's a story that unfolds over time. In classic WoW, the Night Elves have established their new capital of Darnassus on Teldrassil. The city is beautiful, with its treetop structures and connection to nature, but it's also a reminder of what was lost. The Night Elves are learning to live as mortals, to value each moment, to make decisions quickly rather than waiting for the perfect time. This transformation has also affected their relationship with other races. The Night Elves have joined the Alliance, an alliance that would have been unthinkable before the Third War. They fought alongside humans, dwarves, and gnomes against the Burning Legion, and that shared experience created bonds that couldn't be easily broken. But the relationship is complicated. The Horde killed Cenarius, the demigod who was so important to Night Elf culture. Grommash Hellscream, corrupted by demonic blood, slew the demigod during the Horde's journey to Kalimdor. This act created lasting animosity between the Night Elves and the Horde, though the Night Elves understand that Grom's actions were driven by corruption, not malice. The Night Elves' story in classic WoW is also connected to the Emerald Nightmare, a corruption of the Emerald Dream that threatens to spill into the waking world. The nightmare's influence can be seen in various places. In the Wailing Caverns, where a druid named Gnarlex is trapped in a nightmare. In Dire Maul, where ogres feel the nightmare's influence. And in the Dragons of Nightmare, world bosses that periodically devastate the mortal realm. Fandral Staghelm's role becomes increasingly suspicious as classic WoW progresses. He questions whether Tyrande Whisperwind is the proper ruler, suggesting that the Night Elves need stronger leadership. Ages passed. Fandral lost his son during the War of the Shifting Sands, a massive battle containing the old god Cthulhu's threat. However, his deceased son's image now manipulates Staghelm. Cthulhu and his minions still pose a world-threatening danger, and players should pay close attention to quests involving Staghelm, as his corruption by the old gods makes him a dangerous figure, even if his true nature isn't fully revealed until later. The Night Elves also face threats from within their own ranks. The Highborn Night Elves who practiced arcane magic and were exiled after the War of the Ancients have become the High Elves and later the Blood Elves. But some Highborn remained, and their presence creates tension within Night Elf society. Despite all these challenges, the Night Elves endure. They have adapted to mortality, have joined the Alliance, and have established a new home on Tel'Dressel. They remain connected to nature, remain committed to protecting Azeroth, and remain one of the most powerful forces in the world. Their story in classic WoW is one of loss, but also one of resilience and adaptation. Tel'Dressel itself is a massive tree, so large that an entire city can be built within its branches. Darnassus, the Night Elf capital, is a marvel of organic architecture, with buildings that seem to grow from the tree itself. The city is divided into districts: the Warrior's Terrace, where soldiers train; the Temple Gardens, where priests and druids commune; the Craftsman's Terrace, where artisans work; and the Cenarian Enclave, where druids gather. The city's design reflects the Night Elves' connection to nature, with every structure blending seamlessly into the tree's natural form. But Tel'Dressel is also a symbol of the Night Elves' struggle. The tree was planted without the blessings of the dragon aspects, and it shows. The tree is not as healthy as Nordressel was, and it's vulnerable to corruption. The Emerald Nightmare's influence can be felt even here in the Night Elves' new home. The tree's very existence is a reminder of what was lost, of the immortality that can never be regained. The Night Elves' relationship with the Horde is particularly complicated. The Horde killed Cenarius, the demigod who was so important to Night Elf culture. Gromesh Hellscream, corrupted by demonic blood, slew the demigod during the Horde's journey to Kalimdor. This act created lasting animosity between the Night Elves and the Horde, though the Night Elves understand that Grom's actions were driven by corruption, not malice. But understanding and forgiving are two different things, and the Night Elves have not forgotten what was lost. Ashenvale Forest, once a place of peace and beauty, has become a battleground. The Warsong clan, led by Grom Hellscream before his death, began harvesting lumber from the forest, seeing it as a resource to be exploited. The Night Elves, who see the forest as sacred, fought back, and the conflict has been ongoing ever since. Warsong Gulch, the battleground located in Ashenvale, represents this ongoing struggle, with both sides fighting for control of the forest's resources. The Night Elves' druids are particularly important to their culture and their story. The druids are the guardians of the Emerald Dream, the realm of nature's purest form. They can shapeshift into animals, commune with nature, and call upon the power of the wild. But the Emerald Dream is being corrupted by the nightmare, and the druids are on the front lines of this battle. They must fight not just physical enemies, but the corruption of their own sacred realm. The Wailing Caverns tell a particularly tragic story. Naralex, a night elf druid, attempted to restore the Barrens to its former state, to bring life back to the desolate land. But his ritual went wrong, and he became trapped in the Emerald Nightmare. The caverns themselves became corrupted, filled with twisted creatures and nightmare manifestations. Champions must venture into the caverns to free Naralex, but the damage has been done. The Barrens remain desolate, and Naralex's dream of restoration remains unfulfilled. The Night Elves as sentinels, their warrior women, are another important aspect of their culture. Led by Chandra's Feathermoon, the Sentinels are the Night Elves' primary military force. They are skilled archers, fierce warriors, and dedicated protectors of their people. The Sentinels patrol the forests, guard the borders, and stand ready to defend the Night Elves against any threat. They are a symbol of the Night Elves' determination, their refusal to be defeated, their commitment to protecting what remains of their world. The dwarven people of Azeroth are divided into 3 great clans, each with its own history, culture, and territory. The Bronzebeard clan rules from Ironforge, the great mountain city in Kaz Moden. The Wildhammer clan has settled in the hinterlands, having left their previous home of Grim Batal, and the Dark Iron clan dwells in Shadowforge City, deep beneath Blackrock Mountain, enslaved to the Fire Lord Ragnaros. To understand how this division came about, we must look back to the time when all 3 clans lived together in Ironforge, united under the rule of King Modimus Anvilmar. This was a golden age for the dwarves, a time of unity and prosperity. But all things change, and when Modimus Anvilmar died, the 3 clans could not agree on who should succeed him. Civil war erupted. The Bronzebeard clan, led by Madoran Bronzebeard, emerged victorious. The Wildhammer and Dark Iron clans were forced to leave Ironforge. The Wildhammers eventually settled in Grim Batal, where they prospered for a time. The Dark Irons, led by Emperor Thorison, constructed their city in what is now called the Red Ridge Mountains, though it had a different name then. But the Dark Irons could not release their resentment. They still seethed over their defeat, and they gathered forces for retaliation. Both Wildhammer and Bronzebeard repelled the attacks and combined forces to stop the Dark Irons permanently. Emperor Thorison desperate to find a way to defeat his enemies, decided to draw on fiery power from deep within the world and weaponize it. A great spell was woven, but during the conjuring, Thorason's mind turned to his wife's death and his recent defeat. Anger surged through his heart, affecting the spellwork. Unknowingly, he tore Ragnaros the Fire Lord from his elemental plane, summoning him to the world's surface. The Fire Lord's violent rebirth triggered apocalyptic explosions that instantly killed Thaurissan and shattered surrounding mountains. The raging volcano, known as Blackrock Mountain, now towered over the ruined Dark Iron Kingdom. The land was renamed the Burning Steppes and Searing Gorge. Thaurissan's subjects who survived his failed spell were enslaved to Ragnaros. From his lair in Molten Core, deep beneath Blackrock Mountain, the Fire Lord issued commands, having them carve a new fortress called Shadowforge City. Within their fiery domain, they continued nursing hatred toward Wildhammers and Bronzebeards. The Grimbatal battle caused such damage that the Wildhammers decided to relocate. They settled in the hinterlands, though the Dark Iron War had smoothed relations with the Bronzebeards. The Wildhammers would actually fight with Lord Aaron's alliance against the Horde, though they're not available as a playable race in Classic WoW. We only get the Bronzebeard clan, led by Magni Bronzebeard. The Bronzebeards are extremely interested in discovering their heritage, their origins, and creation. Part of their knowledge quest leads into Uldaman, an ancient Titan vault where the truth of the dwarves' origins is revealed. The dwarves are not a naturally occurring race. They were created by the Titans, the godlike beings who shaped Azeroth. The dwarves were originally known as the Earthen, stone beings created to help the Titans shape the world. But the Bronzebeard's story in Classic WoW is also deeply personal. King Magni Bronzebeard needs heroes to rescue his daughter Moira, who has been captured by the Dark Irons and taken to their city. To Alliance infiltrators' surprise, Moira was furious at their actions, this so-called rescue mission. Over time, she had fallen in love with the Dark Iron leader, who, unlike her father, showed her respect and kindness, not thinking less of her simply because she was born female. Pregnant with Thorassan's child, she decided against returning home, instead continuing his work, setting aside her anger to lead the Dark Irons. This Shadowforge city strike had left her clan in complete chaos, and momentarily this proved advantageous, an opportunity to free them from enslavement. While Ragnaros's forces were distracted, she quietly spread word that Dark Iron dwarves were being forced to create a massive army for the Fire Lord. To draw maximum attention, Moira ensured the rest of the world also knew about riches and artifacts to be found, untold power hidden deep within the mountain. Her strategy appears to have been to attract adventurers who would be drawn by the promise of treasure and power, leading them to challenge Ragnaros and free the Dark Irons from their enslavement. Based on the events that followed, this plan proved successful as champions from across Azeroth answered the call. The Hydraxian Water Lords, elemental water beings who were natural fire elemental enemies, also learned of this. They offered aid and rewards to anyone foolish or brave enough to challenge Ragnaros. As molten core defenders fell, champions equipped themselves with fire resistance gear and used the Waterlord's gifts to destroy Ragnaros's protective runes, leaving no barrier between them and the Fire Lord. Ragnaros's strength was legendary, but insufficient to slaughter the invaders. In defeat, he was banished back to his elemental plane, meaning the Dark Irons were finally free. But their leader didn't stop there. Ragnaros only controlled the mountain's lower half. The upper half belonged to Nefarian, Deathwing's son and Onyxia's brother. He had been working diligently on accomplishing his father's goals of reinvigorating their black dragon flight, experimenting and combining all 5 different flights' power to create a powerful new one, known as the chromatic dragon flight. Nefarian had kept his presence concealed, relying on unusual allies to protect his territory. Some orcs who survived defeat at Lordaeron's hands made base within the mountain. They were led by Rend Blackhand and saw themselves as the true Horde, not acknowledging Thrall as their war chief. With the Black Dragon's promised aid, a lie from Nefarian, they teamed up with the Black Dragons, enemies Moira needed to eliminate. Once again, she had her people send information to Azeroth's far corners, telling the world that Ren's horde had allied with the Black Dragonflight. Her spies ensured this knowledge reached Orgrimmar, and she suspected it immediately caused leadership uproar. Thrall had known about this true horde for years, but never imagined they posed any real threat. If Blackhand was foolish enough to trust Deathwing's son, then time was short. Though he was a mighty warrior, the Horde's champions he faced were mightier still. The self-proclaimed true Horde leader died in his stronghold, his followers scattered, abandoning the Black Dragon flight. Nefarian turned his wrath on the Horde's intruders, but they didn't flee. They carved through endless waves of Nefarian's twisted creations until he too fell to their strength and persistence, beautiful Onyxia scale cloaks protecting them from shadow flame engulfment. The Horde's champions took Nefarian's head as victory proof and returned to Orgrimmar as conquering heroes, which left Moira and the Dark Irons waiting for the perfect opportunity to return home and reclaim Ironforge. But that's future discussion. The Dwarven clan's story in classic WoW is one of division, conflict, and the possibility of reunification. The Bronzebeards rule from Ironforge, the Wildhammers have found their home in the Hinterlands, and the Dark Irons, freed from Ragnaros's control, dream of returning to their ancestral home. Ironforge itself is a marvel of dwarven engineering. The city is carved entirely into the mountain, with massive halls, intricate tunnels, and grand chambers. The Great Forge, located at the city's heart, is where the finest dwarven weapons and armor are created. The city's design reflects dwarven values, strength, craftsmanship, and permanence. Everything is built to last, to withstand the test of time, to serve as a testament to dwarven skill and determination. The city is divided into several districts: the military ward, where soldiers train and weapons are stored; the mystic ward, where mages and priests practice their arts; the Hall of Explorers, where archaeologists study the dwarves' origins; and Tinkertown, where the gnomes have made their temporary home. Each district serves a specific purpose, reflecting the dwarves' organized, practical approach to life. The dwarves' quest to discover their origins is a major theme in classic WoW. Through exploration of Uldaman, an ancient Titan vault, the dwarves learn that they are not a naturally occurring race. They were created by the Titans, the godlike beings who shaped Azeroth. Originally known as the Earthen, the dwarves were stone beings created to help the Titans shape the world. Over time, the curse of flesh transformed them into the flesh and blood beings they are today. This discovery is profound. It changes the dwarves' understanding of themselves, of their place in the world, of their relationship with the Titans, and with Azeroth itself. The dwarves are not just inhabitants of Azeroth, they are part of its very foundation, created to serve a purpose that they are only now beginning to understand. The Dark Iron Dwarves' story is particularly tragic. Once proud members of the dwarven people, they were driven by resentment and ambition to summon Ragnaros, an act that enslaved them and destroyed their kingdom. But even in their enslavement, they maintained their identity, their culture, their determination to survive. Moira Bronzebeard's story shows that the Dark Irons are not simply villains. They are a people who have been shaped by tragedy, who have made terrible choices, but who still dream of redemption and reunification. Shadowforge City, the Dark Iron capital beneath Blackrock Mountain, is a dark reflection of Ironforge. Where Ironforge is bright and welcoming, Shadowforge is dark and foreboding. Where Ironforge celebrates life and creation, Shadowforge is focused on death and destruction. But even here, there are signs of hope. Moira's leadership, her determination to free her people, her willingness to work with outsiders to achieve her goals, all suggest that the Dark Irons may yet find their way back to the light. The Wildhammer dwarves, meanwhile, have found their own path. Settled in the hinterlands, they have maintained their connection to the griffins, the great flying beasts that serve as their mounts and companions. The Wildhammers are more in tune with nature than their Bronzebeard cousins, and their culture reflects this. They are fierce warriors, skilled riders, and dedicated protectors of their home. Though they are not a playable race in classic WoW, their presence is felt throughout the game, a reminder that the dwarven people are more diverse, more complex than they might first appear. The gnomes of Gnomeregan represent one of the most tragic stories in classic World of Warcraft. A race known for their brilliance, their inventions, and their technological prowess, the gnomes have been reduced to refugees, living in exile in Ironforge after losing their capital city and 80% of their population in a single catastrophic event. To understand the gnomes' tragedy, we must first understand who they were before the disaster. Gnomeregan was a marvel of engineering, a city built deep within the mountains, filled with technological wonders. The gnomes had created the Deep Run Tram, a fast transport system connecting Stormwind and Ironforge. They had developed countless inventions that benefited all of Azeroth. They were brilliant, ambitious, and confident in their ability to solve any problem through science and engineering. But then the Trogs came. These primitive, brutish creatures emerged from the depths beneath Gnomeregan, invading the gnome city in overwhelming numbers. The gnomes were caught completely off guard. Their technology, their weapons, their defenses all proved insufficient against the Trogg horde. The gnomes found themselves in a desperate situation, facing an enemy they couldn't defeat through conventional means. Gelban Mekatork, the High Tinker and leader of the gnomes, turned to his longtime friend, Sicko Thermoplug, for advice. Sicko proposed using radiation to eliminate the Trogs. The plan was to use gas that would remain in quarantined sections and Gnomeregan's lower levels, poisoning invaders emerging from the depths while gnomes waited safely sealed in upper urban tunnels. At the time, this appeared the only solution to their unexpected invasion. Thermoplug seemed so confident this would succeed. Sadly, most Trogs simply shambled through the gas, if anything growing wilder and becoming irradiated. Even worse, the gas rose through Gnomeregan, killing gnomes who had waited in their homes, choking on vile green clouds behind doors their High Tinker had promised would protect them. 80% of their population perished that day. Even Sicko was shocked, though not for the reasons one might think. His calculations had estimated around a 30% casualties. That's how far he was willing to go to make Gelban appear incompetent. Sicko Thermoplug had been planning this betrayal for a long time. He wanted to seize power, and he saw the Trogg invasion as his opportunity. By proposing a solution that would fail catastrophically, he could make Gelban look like a failure, then step in to save the day. But the disaster exceeded even his expectations. Sicko evaded punishment and now controls Gnomeregan, driven mad by radiation. He rules over the ruins, surrounded by leper gnomes, gnomes who were exposed to the radiation and transformed into twisted, mindless creatures. Meanwhile, the surviving gnomes, led by Gelban Mekatork, fled to Ironforge, where the dwarves kindly offered them space in their city. But for the gnomes, this was the hardest part. For an ambitious race whose lives were validated by masterful command of universal scientific laws, being pitied was unbearable. Being pitied meant being insulted. They had lost everything: their home, their technology, most of their people. They were reduced to refugees, dependent on the charity of others. This was a humiliation that cut deeper than the physical loss. Gelban understood that for his people's sake, they must reclaim their former city, reclaim beloved Gnomeregan, and reclaim gnomish pride. But that would be no easy task. Gnomeregan is now a radioactive wasteland filled with Trogs, leper gnomes, and Sicko Thermoplug's twisted followers. Reclaiming it would require resources, planning, and time. In classic WoW, the gnomes are still in the early stages of this effort, gathering intelligence, testing equipment, and preparing for the day when they can return home. The gnomes' story in classic WoW is one of resilience in the face of overwhelming tragedy. They have lost almost everything, but they haven't given up. They continue to invent, to innovate, to contribute to the Alliance, despite their reduced circumstances. They work alongside the dwarves in Ironforge, but they never forget that Gnomeregan is their true home, and they will return to it one day. The gnomes also represent the dangers of unchecked ambition and the importance of questioning authority. Sicko Thermoplug's betrayal shows how a trusted advisor can become a threat, how confidence can mask incompetence or malice. The gnomes learned a hard lesson about the limits of technology and the importance of considering all possibilities, even the worst case scenarios. But they also learned that they are stronger than they knew. They survived the unthinkable, adapted to their new circumstances, and found a way to continue contributing to the world. The gnomes may be refugees, but they are not defeated. They are planning, preparing, and waiting for their moment to reclaim what was taken from them. Tinkertown, the gnomes section of Ironforge, is a testament to their resilience. Despite their reduced circumstances, the gnomes have created a vibrant community filled with their inventions, their technology, and their indomitable spirit. The area is a maze of mechanical contraptions, steam-powered devices, and technological marvels. It's a place where innovation never stops, where the gnomes continue to create, to invent, to push the boundaries of what's possible. The gnomes' relationship with the dwarves is complex. The dwarves have offered them refuge, and for that the gnomes are grateful. But there's also a sense of pity in the dwarves' eyes, and for the gnomes, that pity is almost worse than the loss itself. The gnomes are a proud people, and being dependent on others, being seen as victims, is a constant source of humiliation. They want to reclaim Gnomeregan, not just for practical reasons, but to restore their pride, to prove that they are not defeated, that they are still a force to be reckoned with. Gnomeregan itself is now a radioactive wasteland, filled with dangers that make reclamation nearly impossible, so trogs still infest the lower levels, their numbers seemingly endless. The leper gnomes, transformed by radiation into mindless creatures, roam the upper levels, a constant reminder of the disaster. Sicko Thermoplug, driven mad by radiation, rules over the ruins, surrounded by his twisted followers. Reclaiming the city would require not just military force, but a way to deal with the radiation, to cleanse the city of its corruption, to restore it to something livable. The gnomes are working on solutions. They're developing new technologies, testing new methods, gathering intelligence. But in classic WoW, these efforts are still in their early stages. The gnomes are preparing, but they're not yet ready to make their move. They need time, resources, and allies. But they're determined, and they will not give up. Gnomeregan will be reclaimed one day, and when it is, the gnomes will once again have a home of their own. The gnomes' contributions to the Alliance should not be underestimated. Despite their reduced circumstances, they continue to provide technological support, engineering expertise, and innovative solutions to problems. The Deep Run Tram, connecting Stormwind and Ironforge, is a testament to gnomish engineering. Their inventions help the Alliance in countless ways, from weapons and armor to transportation and communication. The gnomes may be refugees, but they are still valuable allies, still contributing to the Alliance's strength and success. The Darkspear Trolls have one of the most dramatic origin stories in classic World of Warcraft, a tale of prophecy, sacrifice, betrayal, and redemption. Their journey from isolated island dwellers to members of the Horde is filled with tragedy and triumph, and it begins with a vision. Sen'jin, chieftain of the Darkspear tribe, had a vision. He saw a great storm, and in that storm, He saw salvation. He saw orcs arriving on the islands where his people lived, and he saw that these orcs would change everything. So when Thrall's Eos were driven ashore by the tempest, Sen'jin was waiting. He had prepared for this moment, had told his people that their future lay with these strangers. But the islands were not peaceful. Humans had established settlements there, and they were hostile to both trolls and orcs. The Darkspear were engaged in constant conflict with these human settlers, but it wasn't humans who would claim Sen'jin's life. Murlocs, primitive fish-like creatures, were worshipping a sea witch on the islands. This sea witch, later revealed to be Naga, demanded sacrifices, and the Murlocs were happy to provide them. When the Sea Witch learned of Sen'jin's vision and his plans to join with the orcs, she demanded his life. The Murlocs captured Sen'jin and brought him to the Sea Witch as a sacrifice. His son Vol'jin was pursuing the path toward becoming a shadow hunter at the time, training alongside his closest friend, Zalazane. Vol'jin was away from the village when his father was taken, and by the time he learned of the danger, it was too late. Sen'jin became a sacrifice to honor the Sea Witch. His death was not in vain, however. It galvanized the Darkspear, showing them the cost of inaction. Vol'jin assumed leadership, and the Darkspear joined forces with Thrall. Together, they evacuated the submerging islands and integrated it into the Horde. The Darkspear would become the Horde's third race, bringing with them their voodoo magic, their connection to the Loa, and their fierce loyalty. But Vol'jin's story was far from over. His absence during his father's death, combined with most trolls following Thrall onward, left Vol'jin and some tribesmen to defy the Sea Witch's fury alone. Their purpose involved gathering available supplies before rejoining their kin approximately 1 year later in Durotar, the new orc territory. However, the bond between Vol'jin and Zalazane wasn't destined to endure. Power corrupted Zalazane. As he grew stronger in voodoo magic, he began to see his people as tools rather than family. He employed sinister voodoo to strip most Darkspear trolls of their free will, compelling their obedience. He turned them into mindless puppets, forcing them to serve him. Vol'jin, seeing what was happening, made an impossible decision. Fearing his entire people would succumb to Zalazane's magic, Vol'jin commanded complete abandonment of the Echo Isles, the Darkspear's primary homeland in Kalimdor. Everyone was relocated to Sen'jin Village, a coastal fishing settlement in Durotar named in honor of Vol'jin's father. This was a devastating loss. The Echo Isles had been the Darkspear's home, the place where they had hoped to build their future. But Vol'jin knew that staying meant losing his people's souls, and that was a price he couldn't pay. Champions would eventually assault Zalazane and his followers to reclaim the troll's primary Kalimdor homeland. But in classic WoW, the Echo Isles remain under Zalazane's control, a constant reminder of what was lost and what must be regained. The Darkspear's story in classic WoW is also connected to other troll tribes, though not all trolls are as friendly as the Darkspear. The Sandfury tribe within Zul'Farrak guards potent treasures, with legends speaking of Gazrilla, a formidable creature they revere as their teacher. More dangerous still is the Loa Hakar, the Soul Flayer. This ancient, fearsome entity faces summoning attempts by trolls in Zul'Gurub. Previous attempts occurred, but the Green Dragon aspect Ysera intervened, submerging their temple of Atal Hakar. This time, world champions must prevent the Blood God's emergence and contain this danger. We'll even witness friendly Zandalari trolls arriving to assist, showing that not all trolls are enemies. The trolls have a complex history, with many tribes and many conflicts. The Darkspear represent a new path, one of cooperation and alliance rather than isolation and conflict. Vol'jin's leadership is tested constantly in classic WoW. He must balance his people's needs with the Horde's goals. He must maintain the Darkspear's identity while integrating into a larger faction. He must deal with the loss of the Echo Isles while planning for their eventual recovery. But through it all, he remains committed to his people and to the Horde, proving that the Darkspear are valuable allies and fierce warriors. The Darkspear bring to the Horde their unique perspective, their voodoo magic, and their connection to the Loa. They are the Horde's spiritual guides in many ways, helping to maintain the connection to the old ways even as the Horde modernizes. They are proof that the Horde is truly a place for all outcast and misunderstood peoples, a place where even trolls can find acceptance and purpose. Sen'jin Village, the Darkspear's current home in Durotar, is a coastal settlement that reflects the trolls' connection to the sea and to their traditions. The village is built around fishing and trade, with docks extending into the water and huts constructed in traditional troll style. The village serves as a reminder of what was lost when the Echo Isles were abandoned, but it's also a symbol of the Darkspear's determination to survive and thrive despite their losses. The trolls' voodoo magic is a unique aspect of their culture. Unlike the arcane magic practiced by mages or the holy magic of priests, voodoo is a form of magic that draws power from the Loa, the trolls' ancestral spirits. The Loa are powerful entities that the trolls worship and serve, and in return, the Loa grant them power. This relationship is complex, with each Loa having their own personality, their own demands, and their own gifts. Hakar the Soul Flayer represents the dark side of this relationship. This Loa is not a benevolent spirit, but a bloodthirsty entity that demands sacrifice and feeds on souls. The trolls of Zul'Gurub have attempted to summon Hakar multiple times, but each attempt has been prevented. The Green Dragon aspect Ysera once intervened, submerging the temple of Atal Hakar to prevent Hakar's emergence. But the threat remains, and champions must be ready to face Hakar should the trolls succeed in their dark ritual. The trolls' relationship with other troll tribes is also complex. The Sand Fury tribe in Zul'Farrak guards ancient treasures and reveres Gazarilla, a massive hydra that they see as their teacher. The Gurabashi tribe in Stranglethorn Vale once ruled a vast empire, but their power has waned. The Amani tribe in the hinterlands remains a threat to both Alliance and Horde. The trolls are not a unified people. They are divided into many tribes, each with their own goals, their own traditions, and their own conflicts. The Darkspear's decision to join the Horde was not made lightly. It required them to break with troll tradition, to ally with non-trolls, to become part of something larger than their tribe. But Vol'jin recognized that the old ways were not working, that isolation and conflict were leading to the trolls' destruction. By joining the Horde, the Darkspear found a new path, one that allowed them to maintain their identity while becoming part of something greater. The Echo Isles remain a constant reminder of what was lost. Zalazani's control over the islands, his corruption of the Darkspear who remained, his use of voodoo to strip his people of their free will, all of this weighs heavily on Vol'jin. He knows that the Echo Isles must be reclaimed, that Zalazani must be defeated, that his people must be freed. But in classic WoW, this remains a goal for the future, a challenge that will require the combined efforts of the Horde's champions to overcome. Azeroth is a world filled with ancient evils, entities so powerful and malevolent that they threaten the very existence of reality itself. In classic World of Warcraft, several of these threats emerge from the shadows, testing the strength and resolve of both Alliance and Horde. The old gods, the elemental lords, and other ancient evils represent forces that existed long before the current races of Azeroth, and they will continue to exist long after if they are not stopped. The old gods are perhaps the greatest of these threats. These are massive, tentacled entities of pure evil, imprisoned beneath the surface of Azeroth by the Titans millions of years ago. They are not native to Azeroth. They came from the void, seeking to corrupt and destroy all that the Titans had created. The Titans could not destroy them without killing Azeroth itself, so they imprisoned them deep beneath the world, where they have been dreaming and scheming ever since. In classic WoW, we encounter C'Thun, one of the old gods, imprisoned beneath the sands of Silithus. C'Thun's influence has been spreading for thousands of years, corrupting the land and creating the Kiraji, an insectoid race that serves the old god. The Kiraji built the massive city of Ahan-Kiraj, a testament to C'Thun's power and influence. The War of the Shifting Sands was fought to contain C'Thun's threat. The Kiraji had emerged from Ahan-Kiraj in overwhelming numbers, threatening to overrun all of Kalimdor. The Night Elves, led by Fandral Staghelm, fought desperately to stop them. Staghelm's son was killed in the fighting, a loss that would eventually lead to the Druids' corruption. But the war was won, and the Scarab Wall was erected to seal the Kiraji and C'Thun within Ahan-Kiraj. But the seal is not permanent. In classic WoW, the Kiraji are stirring once more. Their forces are gathering, and they are preparing to break free. This time, it will take the combined efforts of both Alliance and Horde to stop them. The war effort requires players to gather massive amounts of resources, working together across faction lines to prepare for the coming conflict. When the gates of Ahan-Kiraj finally open, it will be one of the most epic events in classic WoW's history. C'Thun is not the only old god influence in classic WoW. The Emerald Nightmare, a corruption of the Emerald Dream, is spreading. The Nightmare's influence can be seen in various places. In the Wailing Caverns, where the druid Naralex is trapped in a nightmare. In Dire Maul, where ogres feel the nightmare's influence. and in the dragons of nightmare, world bosses that periodically devastate the mortal realm. The nightmare is connected to the old gods, though the full extent of this connection isn't revealed in classic WoW. What we do know is that the nightmare corrupts everything it touches, turning dreams into nightmares and spreading despair and madness. The Night Elves, with their deep connection to the Emerald Dream, are particularly vulnerable to this corruption. Fandral Staghelm's story is deeply connected to the old gods. His son's death during the War of the Shifting Sands left him vulnerable to manipulation. The old gods, specifically Sethune, used a vision of Staghelm's deceased son to corrupt him. This corruption isn't fully revealed in classic WoW, but players can see signs of it. Staghelm questions whether Tyrande is the proper ruler, suggesting that the Night Elves need stronger leadership. He plants Teldrassil without proper consultation, an act of selfishness that the dragon aspects refuse to bless. The Elemental Lords represent another category of ancient threat. These are powerful beings who ruled over the elements before the Titans arrived on Azeroth. When the Titans ordered Azeroth, they imprisoned the Elemental Lords in their own planes, where they have been trapped ever since. But they are not forgotten, and they are not powerless. Ragnaros the Fire Lord is the most prominent Elemental Lord in classic WoW. As we've discussed, he was summoned to Azeroth by Emperor Thaurissan, though not intentionally. Ragnaros's Ervaldo Hyjal created Blackrock Mountain and enslaved the Dark Iron Dwarves. From his lair in Molten Core, deep beneath the mountain, Ragnaros commands his fire elementals and plots his eventual return to full power. Defeating Ragnaros is one of classic WoW's greatest challenges. Champions must venture deep into Molten Core, facing fire elementals, lava giants, and other creatures of flame. They must equip themselves with fire resistance gear, using gifts from the Hydraxian Waterlords to destroy Ragnaros's protective runes. Only then can they face the Fire Lord himself, and even then, victory is not guaranteed. But Ragnaros is not truly destroyed when defeated. He is banished back to his elemental plane, but he can be summoned again. The Dark Irons know this, and they continue to serve him even after his initial defeat, hoping to one day bring him back to full power. Other ancient threats lurk in classic WoW. The Black Dragonflight, corrupted by the old gods, schemes from their lairs. Onyxia, daughter of Deathwing, infiltrates Stormwind's nobility. Nefarian, her brother, experiments with dragonflight powers in Blackwing Lair. These dragons represent a threat that spans generations, a corruption that has been spreading for thousands of years. The Scourge, while a more recent creation, represents an ancient evil in its own right. The Lich King, formed from the soul of Ner'zhul, wields powers that predate the current age. Kel'Thuzad, the Lich who serves the Lich King, has been studying necromancy for decades, perfecting the arts of death and undeath. The Scourge's threat is immediate and ongoing, with Naxxramas floating over the Plaguelands, a constant reminder of the danger that awaits. All of these threats are interconnected in ways that aren't always obvious. The old gods corrupt the Emerald Dream, creating the nightmare. The nightmare influences druids like Fandral Staghelm. The black dragonflight was corrupted by the old gods. The scourge serves the burning legion, which seeks to destroy all that the Titans created, including the world the old gods seek to corrupt. Everything is connected, and defeating one threat often reveals another, even greater danger lurking in the shadows. This is the world of classic World of Warcraft, a place where ancient evils are awakening, where heroes must rise to meet challenges that seem insurmountable, where the fate of the world hangs in the balance. The old gods dream in their prisons, the elemental lords plot their return, and the forces of darkness gather their strength. But the races of Azeroth are not without hope. They have faced impossible odds before and emerged victorious. They will face these threats again, and they will fight until the end. The zones of classic WoW each tell their own stories, each contribute to the larger narrative. The Barrens, that vast stretch of land in central Kalimdor, is a place of survival and conflict. The Horde has established outposts here, but the land itself is harsh, filled with dangerous creatures and rival factions. The Centaurs still raid, the Quillbore threaten travelers, and the conflict between Alliance and Horde simmers just beneath the surface. The Crossroads, the Horde's main settlement in the Barrens, is a constant reminder that this is contested territory, that peace is fragile, that conflict can erupt at any moment. Stranglethorn Vale, on the other hand, is a jungle filled with danger and opportunity. The Gurabashi trolls once ruled here, and their ruins still dot the landscape. The goblins of Booty Bay have established a neutral port, a place where both Alliance and Horde can trade, but where conflict is strictly forbidden. The jungle itself is filled with dangerous creatures, from tigers to raptors to the massive Stranglethorn tigers that hunt the unwary. The zone is a microcosm of classic WoW itself, dangerous, unpredictable, filled with stories waiting to be discovered. The Plaguelands, both eastern and western, tell the story of the Scourge's devastation. These lands were once fertile, once home to thriving communities. But the plague changed everything. The land itself is corrupted, the water is poisoned, and the undead roam freely. The Scarlet Crusade maintains a presence here, fighting a desperate war against the Scourge. But their fanaticism has made them as dangerous as the undead they fight, and travelers must be careful not to fall victim to their zealous crusade. The zones are not just backdrops, they are characters in their own right, each contributing to the story, each reflecting the conflicts and themes of classic WoW. From the desolate wastes of Desolacy to the frozen peaks of Winterspring, from the corrupted swamps of Dustwallow Marsh to the ancient forests of Fellwood, each zone has its own story, its own dangers, its own secrets waiting to be uncovered. The raids of classic World of Warcraft represent the pinnacle of group content, the greatest challenges that players can face. But they are more than just difficult encounters. They are the culmination of storylines, the resolution of conflicts, and the confrontation with Azeroth's greatest threats. Each raid tells a story, and together they form a narrative of heroes rising to meet impossible challenges. But before players can face the raids, they must first prove themselves in dungeons. These smaller group challenges serve as training grounds, as story progression, as ways to gather the equipment and experience needed for the greater challenges ahead. Each dungeon tells its own story, contributes to the larger narrative, and provides players with opportunities to explore Azeroth's history and conflicts. The Dead Mines, for example, tells the story of the Defias Brotherhood's quest for revenge. Players venture into the abandoned mine, fighting through Van Cleef's forces, facing his lieutenants, and finally confronting the man himself. The dungeon is not just a series of fights. It's a story of betrayal, of broken promises, of a man driven to extremism by the injustice he suffered. Defeating Van Cleef doesn't just provide loot, it resolves a story. It brings closure to a conflict that has been building since Stormwind's reconstruction. Shadowfang Keep tells a different story, one of arcane experimentation gone wrong. Arugal, a mage who sought to use Worgen to fight the Scourge, instead created a new threat. The Worgen, once controlled, broke free and now infest the keep. Players must venture into the haunted castle, facing the Worgen, confronting Arugal's twisted experiments, and finally putting an end to the mage's dark work. The dungeon is a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition, about the price of using dark magic to fight darkness. Blackrock Depths is perhaps the most complex dungeon in classic WoW, a massive underground city that tells the story of the Dark Iron Dwarves' enslavement. The dungeon is divided into multiple sections, each with its own story, its own challenges, its own bosses. Players can choose different paths, face different challenges, and experience different aspects of the Dark Iron story. The dungeon culminates in the confrontation with Emperor Dagran Thorison, Moira's husband, a fight that represents the Dark Iron's struggle for freedom and identity. These dungeons, and many others, serve as the foundation for the raid content. They teach players how to work together, how to coordinate, how to face challenges that require more than just an individual skill. They tell stories that build toward the raids, that set up the conflicts and challenges that will be resolved in the larger group content. They are essential parts of the classic WoW experience, not just stepping stones to the endgame, but valuable stories in their own right. Molten Core is where it all begins for most raiders. Located deep beneath Blackrock Mountain, this is the lair of Ragnaros, the Fire Lord. As we've discussed, Ragnaros was summoned to Azeroth by Emperor Thorison's failed spell, though not intentionally. The Fire Lord's arrival created the mountain itself and enslaved the Dark Iron Dwarves. From Molten Core, Ragnaros commands his fire elementals and plots his eventual return to full power. The journey into Molten Core is itself a challenge. Players must navigate through Blackrock Depths, fighting their way past Dark Iron Dwarves and other dangers. They must form a raid of 40 players, the largest group size in classic WoW. They must equip themselves with fire resistance gear, as the entire instance is filled with fire damage. The Hydraxian Waterlords provide assistance, offering quests and rewards to those brave enough to challenge the Fire Lord. The raid itself is a test of coordination, strategy, and persistence. 10 bosses stand between the players and Ragnaros, each requiring specific tactics and coordination. Lucifron, Magmater, Gehennas, Gar, Baron Geddon, Shazra, Sulfuron Harbinger, Golemag the Incinerator, and the Majordomo Executus must all be defeated before Ragnaros can be summoned. When Ragnaros finally emerges, he is a sight to behold. A massive being of living flame, he towers over the players, his voice echoing through the chamber. "By fire be purged," he roars, and the battle begins. This is not just a fight, it's an epic confrontation with an ancient power, a being who existed before the current races of Azeroth were even created. Defeating Ragnaros is a momentous achievement, but it's not the end. The Fire Lord is banished back to his elemental plane, but he can be summoned again. The Dark Irons know this, and they continue to serve him, hoping to one day bring him back to full power. But for now, the threat is contained, and the champions who defeated him have proven themselves capable of facing even the greatest of challenges. Onyxia's lair presents a different kind of threat. Onyxia, daughter of Deathwing, has been manipulating Stormwind from within, posing as Lady Katrana Prester. Her infiltration has caused chaos, from the Defias Brotherhood's formation to King Varian's disappearance, but her true identity has been exposed, and she has fled to her lair in Dustwallow Marsh. The journey to Onyxia's lair is itself an adventure. Players must complete a long quest chain, gathering information and proving themselves worthy. The lair is located in a cave system, and reaching Onyxia requires fighting through her dragonkin minions. But the real challenge is Onyxia herself. Onyxia is a master of deception and manipulation, and her fight reflects this. She uses fear, mind control, and devastating breath attacks. She can phase between the ground and the air, requiring players to adapt their tactics constantly. Her deep breath attack can wipe an entire raid if not handled correctly. But defeating her is essential, not just for the loot, but for the story. Onyxia's death removes a major threat to Stormwind and helps restore stability to the human kingdom. Blackwing Lair continues the story of the Black Dragonflight. Nefarian, son of Deathwing and brother to Onyxia, has been conducting terrible experiments in the upper levels of Blackrock Mountain. He has been trying to create a new dragonflight by combining the powers of all 5 existing flights. The result is the chromatic dragonflight, abominations that combine the worst aspects of all dragon types. Nefarian's experiments have created twisted creatures, dragons that should not exist. He has also been working with Rend Blackhand's True Horde, though this alliance is based on lies. Nefarian has no intention of helping the orcs. He's using them as pawns in his own schemes. The raid through Blackwing Lair is a journey through Nefarian's twisted laboratory. Players face his experiments. Razorgore the Untamed, a black dragon controlled through mind control. Velastras the Corrupt, a red dragon forced to serve Nefarian. Broodlord Lashlayer and his dragonkin, the 3 Draconids, Firemaw, Ebonrock, and Flamegore, and finally Chromagus, one of Nefarian's most successful experiments. Nefarian himself is the final boss, and he is a master of all dragonflight abilities. He can use the powers of red, green, blue, and bronze dragons, making him an incredibly versatile and dangerous opponent. But defeating him is essential, as his experiments represent a threat to all of Azeroth. If he succeeds in creating a perfect chromatic dragonflight, nothing would be able to stop him. The Temple of Ahn'Qiraj represents the culmination of the war effort, one of classic WoW's most epic events. The Qiraji, servants of the old god Chthun, have been sealed behind the Scarab Wall for thousands of years. But the seal is weakening, and the Qiraji are preparing to break free. Both Alliance and Horde must work together, gathering massive amounts of resources to prepare for the coming war. When the gates of Ahn'Qiraj finally open, it's a server-wide event. Players from both factions have contributed to the war effort, and now they must work together to stop the Qiraji invasion. The opening of the gates triggers a massive battle, with Qiraji forces pouring out of the temple. Players must fight them back, protecting the world from Chthun's servants. The Temple of Ahn'Qiraj is actually two separate raids. The Ruins of Ahn'Qiraj, a 20-player raid, and the Temple of Ahn'Qiraj proper, a 40-player raid. The ruins tell the story of the Qiraji's preparation, while the temple takes players deep into Chthun's domain. The Temple of Ahn'Qiraj is one of classic WoW's most challenging raids. The Qiraji are organized, intelligent, and deadly. Players must navigate through their hive-like city, facing their generals, their constructs, and their most powerful servants. The twin emperors, Veclor and Vecnalash, represent a unique challenge, requiring perfect coordination to defeat. But the ultimate challenge is Chthun itself. The old god is massive, a being of pure evil that exists partially in reality and partially in nightmare. Fighting Chthun is not just a battle, it's a descent into madness. The old god's influence warps reality, creating illusions and nightmares. Players must maintain their sanity while fighting an entity that predates the current world. Defeating Chthun is one of classic WoW's greatest achievements. It requires the combined efforts of 40 players, perfect coordination, and the ability to resist the old god's mental influence. But it's also essential, as Chthun's full awakening would mean the end of Azeroth as we know it. Naxxramas represents the final challenge of classic WoW, the ultimate test of a raider's skill and determination. This floating necropolis hovers over the eastern plaguelands, a constant reminder of the Scourge's threat. Kel'Thuzad, the Lich who serves the Lich King, commands from within, preparing for the Scourge's next move. Naxxramas is divided into 4 wings, each representing a different aspect of death and undeath. The Plague Quarter, the Death Knight wing, the Spider wing, and the Abomination Quarter. Each wing tells part of Kel'Thuzad's story, from his time as a human mage to his transformation into a lich. The raid is filled with some of classic WoW's most memorable encounters. Patchwork, the abomination who exists only to kill. Thaddeus, the stitched-together horror created from multiple bodies. The 4 horsemen, Death Knights who represent the Lich King's greatest servants. And Kel'Thuzad himself, the master of the necropolis. Kel'Thuzad's fight is the culmination of a story that began in Warcraft 3. He was the human mage who first contacted the Lich King, forming the cult of the Damned and spreading the plague across Lordaeron. He was killed by Arthas, then resurrected as a lich using the corrupted Sunwell. He served the Lich King faithfully, commanding the Scourge's forces in the Plaguelands from his floating necropolis. Defeating Kel'Thuzad requires venturing through all four wings of Naxxramas, facing its horrors, and finally confronting the Lich himself. This is not just a battle, it's the resolution of a story that has been building since the Third War began. Kel'Thuzad's defeat represents a major victory against the Scourge, though the Lich King himself remains in Northrend, waiting for his time to strike. Kel'Thuzad's phylactery, the vessel that contains his soul, was not destroyed during the raid. Based on what we know about liches and their nature, this suggests the Lich could potentially return if the phylactery were to be used to restore him. In classic WoW, the phylactery's fate remains uncertain, though the Scourge's continued presence suggests that Kel'Thuzad's story may not be over. For now, however, Naxxramas is cleared, and the Plaguelands are slightly safer, though the Scourge's threat remains ever present. The raids of classic WoW tell a complete story, from the awakening of ancient evils to their eventual defeat. They represent the pinnacle of what players can achieve when they work together, when they coordinate, when they dedicate themselves to a common goal. These are not just game mechanics, they are epic tales of heroism, of sacrifice, of triumph against impossible odds. But the story of classic World of Warcraft extends beyond the raids. The battlegrounds represent another aspect of the ongoing conflict between Alliance and Horde. Warsong Gulch, Arathi Basin, and Alterac Valley are not just places to fight. They are strategic locations that both factions desperately need to control. Warsong Gulch is located in Ashenvale, a forest that has become a battleground between the Night Elves and the Horde. The Warsong clan, led by Gromesh Hellscream before his death, has been harvesting lumber from the forest, angering the Night Elves who see it as sacred. The battleground represents this ongoing conflict, with both sides fighting to control the flag and prove their dominance. Arathi Basin is a resource-rich region that both factions need. The basin contains valuable minerals, fertile land, and strategic positions. Control of Arathi Basin means control of resources, and in a world constantly at war, resources are everything. The battleground pits teams of 15 players against each other, fighting to control 5 key locations and gather resources for their faction. Alterac Valley is the largest and most epic of the battlegrounds, pitting 40 players against 40 in a massive battle for control of the valley. This battleground tells a story of its own, with NPCs, quests, and objectives that create a living, breathing battlefield. The Frostwolf clan fights to defend their home, while the Stormpike Guard fights to claim it. This is not just a skirmish, it's a war, and the outcome affects the entire region. These battlegrounds represent the ongoing Cold War between Alliance and Horde. They fought together against the Burning Legion, but that cooperation was born of necessity. In the aftermath of the Third War, old tensions have resurfaced. The Alliance and Horde are once again enemies, though the conflict is contained, for now, to these designated battlegrounds and occasional world PvP skirmishes. But the world of classic WoW is not just about conflict. It's also about exploration, discovery, and adventure. Players venture into dungeons like the Dead Mines, where they confront the Defias Brotherhood and their leader Edwin Van Cleef. They explore Shadowfang Keep, fighting against the Worgen and Arugal's twisted experiments. They journey into Blackrock Depths, facing the Dark Iron Dwarves and their twisted society. Each dungeon tells a story. Each quest reveals more about the world. Each encounter adds to the rich narrative of classic World of Warcraft. This is a living world, filled with history, conflict, and possibility. Every zone has its own story. Every NPC has their own motivations. Every quest contributes to the larger narrative. The world of classic WoW is also filled with mysteries and secrets. The Scepter of the Shifting Sands, the quest to open the gates of Ahn'Qiraj, requires players to complete an epic quest chain that spans multiple zones and tells the story of the War of the Shifting Sands. The Corrupted Ashbringer, a legendary weapon that can be obtained in Naxxramas, tells the story of the Ashbringer and its corruption, a tale that will continue in future expansions. Classic World of Warcraft represents a foundational era in Azeroth's history. It's a time when the world is still recovering from the Third War, when new alliances are forming, when ancient evils are awakening. It's a time of heroes and villains, of epic battles and personal struggles, of triumph and tragedy. The story of classic WoW is not just about the major events and characters we've discussed. It's also about the countless smaller stories that unfold as players explore the world. The Defias Brotherhood's quest for revenge, the missing diplomat, and the mystery of King Varian's disappearance, the legend of Stalvin and the haunted house in Duskwood, the story of the missing paladins, and the truth behind the Scarlet Crusade. Duskwood itself is a zone that tells a story of corruption and fear. Once a peaceful region, known as Brightwood, the zone was corrupted by the Scythe of Elune, an artifact that transformed the land and its inhabitants. The zone is now shrouded in perpetual darkness, filled with Worgen, undead, and other horrors. The town of Darkshire struggles to survive, its citizens living in constant fear, its guards fighting a losing battle against the darkness. The zone is a microcosm of classic WoW's themes: corruption, fear, and the struggle to maintain hope in the face of overwhelming darkness. The legend of Stalvin Mistmantle is particularly tragic. This quest chain tells the story of a man who murdered his family in a fit of rage, then spent the rest of his unlife haunted by what he had done. The quest takes players through a series of clues, revealing the truth piece by piece, until finally confronting Stalvin's ghost in the haunted house. It's a story of guilt, of regret, of the consequences of violence, and it's one of classic WoW's most memorable quest chains. The Missing Diplomat quest chain is another example of classic WoW's storytelling. This quest takes players across multiple zones, following clues, uncovering a conspiracy, and eventually revealing the truth about King Varian's disappearance. The quest chain is complex, involving multiple factions, hidden agendas, and political intrigue. It's a story that rewards careful attention, that reveals its secrets gradually, that makes players feel like detectives uncovering a mystery. The Scarlet Crusade's story is particularly complex. This organization was originally formed to fight the Scourge, but Dreadlord infiltration corrupted it from within. The Crusade became so fanatical that it could no longer distinguish between the Scourge and the Forsaken, between friend and foe. The organization's leaders, High Lord Mograine and others, were manipulated by the Dreadlords, turned into tools of the very evil they sought to destroy. The Scarlet Monastery and the Scarlet Crusade's other strongholds are filled with fanatics who will attack anyone they perceive as a threat, making them dangerous to both Alliance and Horde. The story of the Ashbringer, the legendary weapon, is woven throughout classic WoW. The weapon was created by High Lord Mograine, but its corruption and the corruption of its wielder tell a story of how even the purest intentions can be twisted. The corrupted Ashbringer, obtainable in Naxxramas, represents the weapon's fall, its transformation from a tool of light into a tool of darkness. The weapon's story will continue in future expansions, but in classic WoW, it serves as a reminder of how corruption can affect even the most powerful artifacts. The world bosses of classic WoW also tell stories. Azurigos, the Blue Dragon, guards ancient knowledge in Ajara. Lord Kazak, a powerful demon, threatens the world from the Blasted Lands. The Dragons of Nightmare, corrupted green dragons, periodically emerge to devastate the mortal realm. These bosses are not just loot pinatas. They are characters with stories, with motivations, with roles in the larger narrative. Defeating them is not just about the rewards. It's about protecting Azeroth from threats that are too powerful for smaller groups to handle. The quest system itself is a storytelling tool. Every quest tells a story, whether it's a simple kill 10 boars or a complex multi-part chain that spans multiple zones. The quests reveal the world's history, its conflicts, its characters. They give players reasons to explore, to fight, to make choices. The quest text, often overlooked by players focused on efficiency, contains rich lore, character development, and world building. Reading the quest text is like reading a novel, with each quest contributing to the larger story. The reputation system also tells a story. Players can gain or lose reputation with various factions, and these relationships affect how those factions treat the player. The Timbermaw Hold Furbolgs, for example, are initially hostile, but players can earn their trust through quests and actions. The relationship between players and factions is dynamic, changing based on the player's choices and actions. This system makes the world feel alive, makes the player's actions feel meaningful, makes the story feel interactive. The economy of classic WoW also tells a story. The auction house, player trading, the value of different items, all of these reflect the world's needs and priorities. Rare materials are valuable because they're needed for powerful items. Crafted goods are valuable because they represent skill and effort. The economy is not just a game mechanic, it's a reflection of the world's priorities, of what's important, of what people are willing to pay for. Guilds, too, tell stories. These player created organizations serve as communities, as support networks, as groups of friends working together toward common goals. Guilds have their own cultures, their own traditions, their own stories. The guild that first defeats Ragnaros, the guild that opens the gates of Ahn'Qiraj, the guild that clears Naxxramas, these achievements become part of the server's history, part of the community's story. Guilds are not just game mechanics, they're social structures that create their own narratives, their own legends, their own histories. All of these stories, big and small, come together to create the rich narrative of classic World of Warcraft. This is a world where every quest matters, where every NPC has a story, where every zone has history. It's a world that feels alive, that feels real, that feels like a place you could actually visit. The factions themselves are more than just game mechanics. They represent real philosophical differences, real cultural conflicts, real reasons to fight. The Alliance values order, justice, and tradition. The Horde values freedom, honor, and the right to determine one's own destiny. These are not just abstract concepts. They are the driving force behind every conflict, every alliance, every decision made in classic WoW. The races, too, have their own stories, their own cultures, their own reasons for being part of their respective factions. The humans of Stormwind, rebuilding after the First War, fighting to maintain their kingdom. The orcs of Durotar, seeking redemption and a new homeland. The Night Elves, adapting to mortality and finding their place in a changed world. The Forsaken, fighting for survival and acceptance in a world that rejects them. All of these stories intertwine, creating a complex narrative that spans continents, races, and factions. This is not a simple story of good versus evil. It's a story of conflicting perspectives, of moral ambiguity, of difficult choices and their consequences. As classic World of Warcraft draws to a close, the world stands on the brink of new challenges. The dark portal will reopen, leading to Outland and new adventures. The Lich King will awaken fully, bringing the Scourge to new heights of power. Deathwing will return, shattering the world itself. But for now, in this moment, this is the world of classic WoW, a place of heroes and villains, of epic battles and personal struggles, of triumph and tragedy. The legacy of classic World of Warcraft is not just in the stories it tells, but in the community it created. This was a game that brought millions of people together, that created friendships and rivalries, that gave players a world to explore and stories to experience. It was a game that defined a generation of MMOs, that set the standard for what an online world could be. The social aspects of classic WoW are fundamental to its experience. Unlike modern MMOs, where much of the content can be completed solo, classic WoW requires cooperation. Forming groups for dungeons, coordinating raids, working together in battlegrounds, all of these activities require communication, teamwork, and social interaction. The game forces players to interact with each other, to form relationships, to build communities. This social aspect is not just a side effect, it's a core part of the classic WoW experience. The server communities that formed in classic WoW are legendary. Each server developed its own culture, its own rivalries, its own legends. Players knew each other, recognized each other, formed relationships that extended beyond the game. The server forums were places of discussion, debate, and community building. The world felt smaller, more intimate, more personal. Players weren't just anonymous avatars, they were members of a community with reputations, relationships, and histories. The class system itself tells stories. Each class has its own identity, its own role, its own story. Warriors are the frontline fighters, the tanks who protect their allies. Mages are the masters of arcane magic, capable of devastating damage, but fragile. Priests are the healers, the support, the ones who keep everyone alive. Each class has its own quests, its own abilities, its own role in groups. The class you choose affects how you experience the world, what stories you encounter, what challenges you face. The profession system also contributes to the story. Blacksmiths create weapons and armor, contributing to the war effort. Alchemists brew potions that give players an edge in battle. Engineers create gadgets and devices that solve problems in creative ways. Each profession has its own story, its own progression, its own role in the world. The profession system makes the world feel more real, more lived in, more like a place where people actually work and create. The PvP system tells its own story. The honor system, introduced in classic WoW, created a competitive environment where players could fight for rank and recognition. The system was brutal, requiring massive amounts of time and effort to reach the highest ranks. But it also created legends, players who achieved the rank of High Warlord or Grand Marshal, who became known across their servers for their PvP prowess. The honor system is not just a game mechanic, it's a story of competition, of dedication, of players pushing themselves to achieve greatness. The battlegrounds themselves are stories. Warsong Gulch tells the story of the conflict between the Night Elves and the Warsong clan over Ashenvale's resources. Arathi Basin tells the story of two factions fighting for control of valuable territory. Alterac Valley tells the story of the Frostwolf clan defending their home against the Stormpike Guard's invasion. Each battleground is not just a place to fight. It's a story being told, a conflict being resolved, a battle that matters in the larger narrative. The world events of classic WoW also tell stories. The opening of the gates of Ahn'Qiraj was a server-wide event that required the cooperation of hundreds of players. The event was epic, memorable, and it created stories that players would tell for years. The world events made Azeroth feel alive, like a place where things were happening, where history was being made, where players were part of something larger than themselves. The legacy of classic WoW extends beyond the game itself. It influenced game design, creating standards and expectations that would shape the MMO genre for years to come. It created a community that would endure long after the game's initial release. It told stories that would resonate with players, that would become part of gaming culture, that would be remembered and discussed for decades. The decision to release World of Warcraft Classic to recreate the original experience was a testament to the game's enduring appeal. Players wanted to return to that world, to experience those stories again, to recapture that sense of community and adventure. Classic WoW's re-release proved that the game's appeal was not just nostalgia, but something deeper, something about the world, the stories, the community that made it special. The story of classic World of Warcraft is ongoing. Even as the game has evolved, even as new expansions have been released, the events of classic WoW continue to shape Azeroth's history. The choices made, the battles fought, the stories told, all of these continue to matter, continue to influence the world, continue to be part of the larger narrative. Classic WoW is not just a game, it's a foundation, a beginning, a world that continues to grow and evolve. The story of classic WoW is ongoing, even as the game itself has evolved. The events we've discussed, the characters we've met, the battles we've fought, all of these continue to shape Azeroth's history. The choices made in classic WoW have consequences that echo through every expansion, every update, every new chapter in the world's story. This is the story of classic World of Warcraft, a world recovering from war, facing new threats, and finding new purpose. It's a story of heroes rising to meet impossible challenges, of ancient evils awakening from their slumber, of alliances forming and breaking, of a world that is constantly changing, yet always familiar. Thank you for joining us on this extensive journey through the complete story of classic World of Warcraft. We've explored the aftermath of the Third War, the formation of new alliances, the rise of ancient threats, and the heroes who rose to meet them. We've witnessed the transformation of the Horde, the rebuilding of the Alliance, and the countless smaller stories that make Azeroth feel alive. The world of classic WoW is vast, complex, and filled with stories waiting to be discovered. Whether you stand with the Alliance or pledge allegiance to the Horde, whether you explore the depths of Molten Core or the heights of Naxxramas, whether you fight in the battlegrounds or quest through the zones, you are part of this story. You are helping to shape Azeroth's history, one quest, one battle, one adventure at a time. May your adventures in Azeroth be filled with epic victories and memorable tales. May you find friends to share your journey with, enemies to test your strength against, and stories that will stay with you long after you log off. Until our next journey through Warcraft's rich history, rest well and good night. The zones we haven't yet explored in detail also tell important stories. The Eastern Plaguelands, for example, are a wasteland of corruption and death. The Scourge's influence is strongest here, with the floating necropolis Naxxramas hovering over the land like a dark cloud. The zone is filled with undead, with corrupted wildlife, with the remnants of a once thriving civilization. The quests here tell stories of loss, of corruption, of the desperate struggle to maintain hope in the face of overwhelming darkness. The zone culminates in the confrontation with Kel'Thuzad and Naxxramas, but even before reaching that point, players experience the full horror of what the Scourge has done to this land. The Western Plaguelands tell a similar story, though here the focus is more on the living's struggle to survive. The zone is divided between the scourge-controlled areas and the areas where the living still fight. The quests here tell stories of resistance, of small victories, of the determination to keep fighting even when the odds seem impossible. The zone's story is one of perseverance, of refusing to give up, of maintaining hope even in the darkest of times. The zones of Kalimdor also have their own stories to tell. Desolacy, for example, is a land that has been devastated by conflict. The Centaur and the Kodos fight for control, while the Naga threaten from the coast. The zone tells a story of a land that has been broken, of a place where survival is a daily struggle. The quests here reveal the history of the land, the conflicts that have shaped it, and the ongoing struggle to find peace in a region where conflict appears to be the norm rather than the exception. Feralis, by contrast, is a land of natural beauty and ancient secrets. The zone is home to the Dire Maul, an ancient city of the Highborn, now occupied by ogres and other dangers. The zone tells a story of ancient power, of civilizations that have fallen, of secrets that remain hidden. The quests here reveal the history of the Highborn, their fall, and the legacy they left behind. The zone is a reminder that Azeroth's history stretches back thousands of years, that the current conflicts are just the latest chapter in a much longer story. The zones are not just places to quest, they are stories waiting to be discovered. Each zone has its own history, its own conflicts, its own characters. Exploring the zones is like reading a book, with each area revealing new chapters, new stories, new insights into the world of Azeroth. The zones work together to create a cohesive narrative, a world that feels real, that feels lived in, that feels like a place with history and depth. The dungeons we haven't yet discussed also contribute to the story. The Wailing Caverns tell the story of Naralex's failed attempt to restore the Barrens and the corruption that resulted. The Razorfen Downs and Razorfen Kraul tell the story of the Quillbore, their culture, and their conflicts. The Maraudon tells the story of Princess Theradras and the Centaur's origins. Each dungeon is a story, a piece of the larger narrative, a contribution to the world's lore. The quest chains that span multiple zones also tell important stories. The Onyxia Attunement quest, for example, takes players through multiple zones, uncovering the conspiracy, revealing Onyxia's true identity, and setting up the confrontation in her lair. The quest chain is not just a means to an end, it's a story in itself, a narrative that builds tension, reveals secrets, and culminates in an epic confrontation. The class-specific quests also tell stories. The Warlock's quest to obtain their Fellsteed, the Paladin's quest to obtain their Charger, the Shaman's quest to obtain their totems, all of these tell stories about the classes, their traditions, and their place in the world. These quests are not just about obtaining items, they're about understanding what it means to be a member of that class, about the responsibilities and powers that come with that identity. The reputation quests also tell stories. Earning reputation with the Timbermaw Hold, for example, requires players to help the Furbolgs, to understand their culture, to prove themselves worthy of trust. The quests reveal the Furbolg's history, their struggles, and their relationship with the other races of Azeroth. Earning reputation is not just about unlocking rewards, it's about building relationships, about understanding cultures, about becoming part of the world's social fabric. All of these elements work together to create the rich, complex narrative of classic World of Warcraft. The game is not just a series of kit quests and dungeons. It's a world, a story, an experience that players become part of. The stories are not just background, they're the heart of the game, the reason players explore, the motivation for everything they do. If you enjoyed this exploration of classic World of Warcraft's story, please like this video and subscribe to World of Sleepcraft for more deep dives into the lore and history of Azeroth. Your support helps us continue bringing you these extensive journeys through Warcraft's rich narrative. Thank you, and may your dreams be filled with epic adventures.